So I'm calling this meeting to order. It's 6:30 p.m. This is the Sherborn Select Board meeting of January 23rd, 2025. Um, the members present, we have Jeff Waldron, Marion Neutra, Paul Durancis, and myself, Stephen Tsai. And can I ask the Assistant Town Administrator to read the executive session agenda?
Good evening. So item number 1 is meeting with town council pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A and 3, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM 449 Mass 444, 2007, to discuss potential litigation, and pursuant to General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal granted aid requirements, specifically the Public Records Law, General Law, Chapter 4, Section 726, to discuss privileged written communication from town council and potential litigation regarding claims of Robert Murchison. Item number 2 is strategy session to prepare for non-contract negotiations with non-bargaining unit employee pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, DPW Director Sean Colleen.
Thank you. And my understanding is that item 1 is going to be removed from the agenda and postponed due to the availability of town council. So can I get a motion relative to the amended agenda?
Move to approve the agenda consisting of item 2.
Second.
Great. We'll take a roll call vote. Jeff,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I am I as well.
I have to turn the recording off now.
Executive session.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, sorry. And so as the acting chair, I do declare that an executive session is necessary for the purpose of contract negotiation, and I move that we enter executive session.
Second.
Great. And we'll take a roll call vote. Jeff,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. So can we turn the recording off now? Well, I can ramble for a bit here. Welcome everybody back to the public session of the Sherborn Select Board of January 23rd, 2025. We have finished the executive session, and Eric, are you technologically all good now? All right.
Yeah.
So
Could you hear what I was saying?
Yeah, I heard you saying something about how your speaker wasn't working, so
I
I just
couldn't
started
hear you.
riffing.
Kind of one side.
All right, back to you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. It is 7:13 on January 23rd, 2025. Welcome to the open session component of the Sherborn Select Board meeting. Without any further ado, I'll please ask the Assistant Town Administrator to please read the open session agenda.
Good evening. Once I read the agenda, the board can vote to amend or approve the agenda. We have a public comment tonight from Chief Zach Ward. Items may be taken out of order and topics not anticipated 48 hours in advance may be added. Item number 1 is the continuation of a hearing from the January 9th, 2025 Select Board meeting for a cable license hearing regarding the renewal of cable television license of Comcast Cable Communications Management, LLC. Item number 2 is the Sherborn History Center and Museum Project Update. Doug Brown and Yugon Kim from TSKP-IKD is here. Item number 3 is the consideration of acceptance of a grant and donation to the Council on Aging. Christina Gallant, the COA Director, will speak on that. Item number
How do
4,
I get my speaker to work?
Item number 4 is the consideration of gift from the Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball and donor from the installation of lights at Jameson 1, the Little League field. Item number 5 is discussion and possible vote to add to the annual town meeting warrant a local recall provision. Item number 6 is the review, discussion, and consideration of the draft warrant articles for the 2025 annual town meeting. Item number 7 is review of draft of the FY26 operating budget. Here tonight to discuss that is the fire chief, the police chief, Jeremy and Sean Colleen and Klaus Alman. Item number 8 is the consent agenda, which is the payroll warrant. A one-day liquor license for Simply Serving event for the Forest and Trails Association, and a one-day liquor license for the Sherborn Lions Club. The other item number 9 is select board reports. Item number 10 is the town administrator report. And item number 11 is discussion of process for appointment of interim commissioners for the North Sherborn Water Sewer District.
Move
right, thank
approval.
Well, thank you very much, Diane. All right.
Move
Do I have any
approval.
motions relative to the agenda?
Move approval.
All right, moving from Paul. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and Marion?
Aye.
All right. Okay, well, without further ado, the first agenda item is the hearing, which we are pretty much going to immediately continue because council is not ready again, and this is becoming a little bit of a reoccurring component on our agenda here. I know I asked this last time, but we just a motion to move and select a date. Is that correct? All
Do
right.
we have a date? Do we know what the date is?
I think it's just gonna be the next meeting unless
Next
someone knows better
meeting.
than me.
February 6th.
February 6th. So the motion is to move to continue the hearing to February 6th.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
and Paul?
Aye.
Did you say nay?
Aye.
Oh, I said, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. I might as well. All right, very good. Okay, moving on. I think we have a presentation here about the Sherborn History Center and Museum Project. Doug Brown and Eugen Kim and TSKP-IKD. I'm assuming that's a firm of some sorts. Who will be presenting on this?
It is. I will start, Mr. Chairman. And I know you have a lot on your agenda, so we'll try to be expeditious. So good evening. My name is Doug Brown. I'm a 20-year Sherborn resident, and I'm the incoming president of the Sherborn Historical Society. And I am delighted to give you this update this evening. I'm going to just briefly set the stage for the conversation, and then I'm going to introduce you to Eugen Kim, who is our fabulous architect, and he will walk you through the specific architectural drawings and provide financial and other details. And of course, we welcome all of your questions. Let me just start by acknowledging the tremendous energy in town from last year's 350th anniversary celebration. It was a level of civic engagement that I certainly haven't seen in my 20 years in town. And we now have a really exciting opportunity to build on that. This year actually represents another important anniversary that's less well known for our town. It is the 250th anniversary of when Eleazar Douse fled to Sherborn immediately after he and his two sons had fought in the Battle of Bunker Hill. Over the next 250 years, there may be no family in America that has done more for a town than what the Douse family has done for Sherborn. And that is saying a lot because we have had many generous families in Sherborn, as you all know. But if you just consider for a moment what the Douse family has done, and I note that one of them appears to be the treasurer right now as well, but they've given us a high school, they've given us an 1858 townhouse, a library, and our beautiful memory statue. Douse ministered to one of our churches for 67 years and served on a school committee for 50. And they've been giving us crisp apples for over 200 years. Now, after all this generosity, when William Bradford Homer Douse gave the town the Douse Memorial Library in 1914, he asked for only two things in return: that we allow the library to be a center for education and sociability, and that the library provide a home for the Sherborn Historical Society. That commitment was explicitly reiterated by the town in 1938, in 1971, and in 1983. Now, what's important to understand is that this desire to accommodate the Sherborn Historical Society was not just a passing thought. William Dowse loved history. His obituary from the American Antiquarian Society tells us that his interests, quote, especially in the latter part of his life, were largely historical. Although connected with many associations and clubs, it was to the historical organizations that he gave much of his time and financial support, end quote. We also know that one of his proudest moments of his life was when he was elected to the Massachusetts Historical Society, perhaps because it had a beautiful remade library that was donated by his great uncle, Thomas Dowse, and filled with Thomas's 5,000 books, which was one of the best libraries in New England of its time and remains there to this day. William and Thomas Dowse both knew that the mixing of history with books was very powerful for a community. And indeed it is for us. The beauty of this project, as you'll see, is that housing a history center in a library is mutually reinforcing. As people get books, they'll learn a bit about history. As they learn about their local history, they'll want to read more books. In that sense, this is not just a history project. It is a community and civic engagement project at a wonderful moment in our town's journey. It will bring our community together for connection and learning and growth in new and exciting ways. In that regard, it is precisely the dream that William Bradford Homer Dowse had in mind in 1914, and as stewards of his legacy, we are really proud to present it to you this evening. So I'll now turn it over to Yugon, who will take you through some of the details.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Thank you for having us today, and we're just excited to show you where we are in the project. Just before I share the screen, I want to reiterate what Doug touched upon, this kind of wonderful opportunity to create this synergy between the library and the museum. And our firm works on both libraries, museums, and schools, all community-focused projects. And I have a special place in my heart for history museums. While we work on many fine art museums, there's something incredibly democratic about history museums because we all live history together. And I think it's incredibly important to find as many opportunities as possible to kind of preserve our local history, because it is, I think, the local history that if we kind of preserve it, it maintains the uniqueness of each community. And so from there, I will share the screen. We are, right now we're at the 100% schematic design phase, which is basically, a quarter within the process of developing the project. I'm sure many of you have seen projects at this particular phase. And so for this project, what we've done is we've worked with our kind of engineering team, worked with the committee to really look at the existing conditions, to develop a design that works with the existing conditions of the library, worked with the library, worked with the committee to really try to design a space that will really support and preserve the collection that the museum has. So from there, I'll share my screen. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Cool. So this is a plan of the proposed design. And so I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with this space, but really in this area is the new footprint of the museum on the lower level of the library. There is a library corridor here that at the bottom of the stairs that has a ramp that comes up this area and will lead to the entry of the museum itself. And so what we've tried to do, even though the space is spall and it has to be kind of broken up into different spaces is to really give a sense of the expanse of the space. And so there's different moments that we've tried to do where at the top of the ramp, people can see within the kind of gallery space, which is located here where my cursor is, and then have views into other spaces, say in this archive over here. But just to orient yourselves fully to the space, we have this kind of lobby space with then the kind of secure door in this area. And then we have this core door that staff can enter and visitors can enter. And this just naturally fit within the space because we have a series of existing columns, which you can see in these hashed area. And so there's a clear delineation between circulation and then also public space, which will be this gallery space here to the south of the page. We have a curator's office here. We have archives here to house the collection. And then we have a staff area / research area in this zone here. It's important to note that we do have one area here in the archives that is a higher level of environmental systems, which will require kind of a more superior HVAC system. And that is kind of based upon certain kind of archive standards that are established within the industry. So this is a picture kind of collaged together of the existing space. And so you can see the series of columns that I mentioned here. This would be at the kind of entry lobby view that I pointed out at the top of the ramp. And so you can see it's a space that's quite raw. It has a lot of piping and infrastructure that's exposed. And really acts as a storage space currently for the library. So this is a rendered view of the entry. And so this is that window at the top of the ramp that I mentioned, so that when visitors come, they can get a glimpse into the gallery and then see the gallery space here. And then this would be the case whether or not the museum was open for visitorship or not. And then we have that kind of corridor that's delineated by those series of columns that I mentioned. And so what we've done to employ this kind of use of color, a green that's inspired by Sherborn itself, to kind of disguise some of the ceiling infrastructure, but really create this vibrant entry that leads you in to the space. And then you can see at the end of the corridor another window that gives visitors a glimpse of the archive space itself. And so, while the space is partitioned off, you still get a wide sense of the full kind of footprint of the museum. As one would walk in, you can see here, they would be kind of surrounded by the collection, some larger elements of the collection here. And then of course, there's a large kind of paper collection as well in the museum archives. This is kind of a first stab of perhaps what an inaugural exhibition may look like. And then we have this kind of change in floor material that delineates this kind of public gallery space. This is that kind of comparison view once again of this corridor here with an exposed ceiling in this circulation zone. And then once people walk into the gallery space, it's kind of delineated by this wood slab acoustical ceiling that really ties it back to some of the aesthetics of the library itself, so that there's a real kind of continuity between some of the finishes between the library above and then this space as well. This is a view of the gallery itself. It would be a very kind of open space that will allow for many different arrangements of objects and perhaps programming as well. One thing that we were incredibly inspired by were the community stories that we could see on the website that the museum has started to generate. There's these wonderful stories from citizens of the town that talk about their childhood or memories or events. And this is something I think we're excited about. And we wanted to try to find a way to celebrate community within this new space. Because as I said before, that's what's so special about history, is that we all participate in it, we all live in it, and we can all create history together. And so what we try to do is, in one space between that series of columns that we kind of pointed out, was to create this kind of screen in itself that would act as a community wall. And as you know, the collection is quite vast. And so just like on the website where people would create stories and collect pictures of memories and objects, we would try to create a physical representation of that, where people could perhaps self-curate different arrangements that could represent their memories of Sherborn. And you can see that in these series of boxes within the space. This would be between those columns that I mentioned. And then beyond that would be the corridor and the curator's office that you saw in the plan. And then again, the window into the archive space here. This is just a kind of slide to really talk about the clear delineations between the circulation space and then also the gallery space itself. And then this is a slide that really talks about the flexibility that we think can be within this large kind of gallery space, is that it can house traditional exhibitions, it could house community gatherings or workshops. And so it really can be that kind of vibrant space that Doug mentioned in concert with the library itself. Is there any questions, or we can maybe move on to some pricing estimates that we received from our estimator?
Any questions by anyone? All right.
Okay, let's go. So we created a kind of schematic design set that really was very clear about demolition, systems. And so the estimator took a few weeks to kind of dive into those drawings and then came up with this initial budget. And so, you have to keep in mind that this is still 100% SD, and so we still have work to do. But you can see here the way that it's kind of falling right now is that the construction costs, as you can see here, is a little over 600,000 because it's an occupied kind of building. There's a certain allowance for that itself that totals this amount here. And then there's the traditional markups for a general contractor with their general conditions and overhead. Then, of course, we add a number of contingency items, especially since we're at SD. And then a number of those, such as design contingency, as we move forward with the project and develop in more detail, that number will that percentage will be reduced and either fund the project or can go back into the pocket of the town. There is escalation contingency based upon the desired start date for the project itself. And then, of course, a construction contingency that we would hold for the duration of the project if it's decided to move forward. This is kind of the total of the hard cost itself that includes all these contingency items. And then this is a list of soft costs. And so we have obviously design fees. It's important to note that a number of these have already been funded. Item A and item E. And then there's additional items that we've have placed in the document in terms of very traditional items such as storage, reinstallation, and then F&E kind of items. And it's a very small space, so we feel comfortable with these numbers. And then you can see the total of the soft costs. And then here is the total project cost here in item 3. And then this is the additional project funding that is needed to have the project move forward. And then this represents the current contingency that is holding, which is within this number here. We, of course, are exploring kind of value engineering items, which you can see here. There's a number of items that you can see the high and low range that we would continue to explore. But with every value engineering items, there are pros and cons with those that we can always talk in more detail if there's interest. So with that, I can turn it back to the committee.
Yeah, actually, I have a couple questions. Can you go back to the value engineering portion of it?
Sure.
Because I love the rendering of the ceiling. What is ACT? Is that regular suspended ceiling we see in every commercial property ever?
Yeah. So you can see here, this is a slide. If you can still see the screen, it's a comparison of the possible some of those value engineering items. So one of them was to change the ACT. So you can see the difference, right? It's the ceiling tile that you see everywhere. Painted floor as opposed to resilient floor. So you can see. And then reduced glazing scope, which then eliminates some of these kind of view corridors that we've proposed as part of the project.
Okay. Okay, get an idea of that. Thank you.
Of course.
Any questions from, I'll say, from the board or really from anyone? Just use your raise hand function, like I always say, please, on your computer, because I can't see people waving at me, especially when you look this big in my computer. Any questions? Looks like Paul, I'm guessing, is searching for his raise hand feature right now.
Damn. Just wondering, I was trying to see on the chart, what's the total cost of the whole thing?
The whole thing is right here. It's 1.36 million.
Thank you.
But
Marion, sorry, I didn't see. Ironically, with the raise hand feature on.
All right, this is an easier one. If we did have all this money in our pocket and said, go ahead, what's the timeline would you anticipate for start to finish, putting this project in place?
Well, I think we need more time to develop the project, but we would be ready to bid, likely midsummer. And then we would move forward. It's not a complicated project. It's pretty straightforward. So I don't expect the construction duration to be that long.
Jeremy, good. You're muted, Jeremy, if you're talking.
To unmute myself. Thank you. Could you go back to the cost estimate for a sec?
Sure.
Yeah, there was a question about the overall cost. That 1.36 million is the overall cost, including the $100,000 that was previously appropriated at town meeting. The balance needed to complete is the 1.272 million. Just wanted to make that clarification.
And I'll also make a kind of commentary. I think it'd be smart to bring it, like I see that with the value engineering, to bring it under $1 million if possible. I know there's some concerns in town, and unfortunately, it's actually in the library. And the reason that being, because it makes sense being in the library. I support it being in the library. There's a little bit still some negativity in the library due to some escalating costs during the construction of its expansion. And although these are completely independent things, I'm worried a little bit about some of the politics and the perception of the public. I personally support this, and I think this is great. And I actually have a couple things I want to contribute to the Historical Society. Jeremy, remind me, is this in the current CIP as proposed for this year, this fiscal year?
It is, yes, it
Okay.
is. It's proposed as a project included in the CIP for FY26.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can just quickly respond, we're completely aware of that, and thank you for raising it. I mean, it's tough timing in that, taxes are high. People are feeling that. We're coming off an inflationary period, and and there is a little hangover in the library, you know? And so we welcome feedback. I mean, the Historical Society is trying really hard to raise money. We've raised $25,000. You probably know Kevin Delaney donated those benches and they raised $15,000, which was great. And we'll just keep trying. I know George Fisk we've looked at grants. So we're open to any and all ideas for additional revenue as well. And we just welcome any help or ideas that anyone has, but we're continuing to try to work that as best we can.
Absolutely. Stephen, please go ahead.
Sure. And first off, I just want to thank you for the work that you've put into this design. Certainly the renderings. I mean, it's really a beautiful project that you have designed here. But there is, I mean, the cost is a significant concern, I think. Just to give you sort of context, this project came up at last year's town meeting, for where it wasn't at the town meeting. I think it was prior to the town meeting. But essentially with an estimated cost of somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million. And that caused such severe sticker shock to everybody in town that essentially, that project was not approved and said, you know what, that's premature. Let's just start with $100,000 to do the design, and hopefully we can come up with sort of like sort of tiers of project sort of scope that maybe will come in lower than $1 million or 800,000. And now instead we're coming in with a cost of 1.3 million. And so I'm just kind of like, this is not an indictment of the work you've done here. I think, again, it's really beautiful. It's just a matter of how is the town going to respond to this request? And I think everybody's initial response is, again, going to be even greater sticker shock. I would suspect that as this goes through capital budget review and advisory committee review and then town meeting, that all of your value engineering strategies are probably going to be applied. And then I guess my question would be, are there other aspects of this design which maybe that aren't just value engineering, but actually maybe simply the basis of the design that could be altered that might reduce the cost? I mean, part of it, and this is just, excuse my sort of ignorance, all I know really about construction would be kind of residential stuff, what it costs to build a house or do a renovation. And, seeing the size of this space that's being renovated and then compared to the estimated construction costs, there's a huge difference. And I know that a lot of that is going to have to do with sort of commercial versus residential construction, but then especially sort of museum construction versus simply residential. I mean, if this space were somebody's unfinished basement in a very large house and they were simply finishing it to be able to live in it, I would assume it's not going to cost, 1.1, $1.2 million. So would you be able to kind of just educate me specifically, but maybe us in general, about what the differences are in the sort of cost of a construction project like this compared to something residential that I think probably most people in town would have more familiarity with?
Yeah, sure. So yes, of course, there are some finishes that are more commercial grade that we would recommend for kind of long-term durability. There is that kind of also item you can see here, this conservation requirements, and that is that one space in the archives. Because this is a museum space, there are certain environmental and climate standards that are typically recommended to follow. However, for this project, what we tried to do was find a more common sense approach so that because we knew that the budget was more limited. And so those are kind of the two aspects of the space. And then you can really see then, because this is going to be run through a general contractor who is more familiar with this type of construction, there is a considerable markup to the project. itself. And so you can see, what the kind of initial costs are, then with all the markups and contingency, this is where we are in SD. And so I think it's I saw the drawings before on the initial estimate. They were schematic. Ours are schematic as well. And so we just need more time to develop more clarity in terms of the scope of the project, so there's less unknowns. And so my recommendation with all clients is that you have to give the design team and the committee more time to study the possibilities. And then as the project hopefully goes out to bid, you keep these add alternates, because until you get the bids, estimates are just guesses until you get the bid itself. And so they're very good kind of estimates, but we always keep these that kind of deduct alternatives as part of the bid, so that then when the bids come in, you're able to either reduce the overall costs, or if the project is bid under, then you can perhaps add that ceiling back in.
Okay. And Marianne,
I
please
have
go
a
ahead.
sort of related question for the architect. First of all, I agree. This is really a beautiful design. And given if we put this design as our goal, are there ways that you could anticipate that the project might be staged such that we could fund it in steps, in smaller steps? The first step, of course, would want to give us the option of actually using the space the way we want it used. So can you see a way of staging this construction such that the space can be used as we want it used, things can be moved into it, but the cost could be spread out over time, because that might give us the opportunity to make some of those stages a grant application, for which we have, a partial construction we need to finish, and we could justify asking for money from the State Historical Society or whatever to get it done.
Yes.
I can't myself see how that could be done without making it very difficult to have the exhibitions in place, but perhaps there are ways you could do that.
I think there are ways to do that by, building the very good bones for the space. And then, some of the costs go to millwork. And so that's a kind of a very low hanging fruit in terms of perhaps some of the millwork is added at a later time. And so then you can finish out the space, and then perhaps, as we had shown here, is that you can see that we have a series of cabinets in this view, but potentially, rather than that, you could just have a graphic, and then later down the line, if funds became available, you could add that millwork at a later time. There are other kind of strategies we can offer, but phasing, I think, is a wonderful next step to explore to find ways of reducing the overall budget. But as you all know, since this is a small space, there is definitely a threshold that we will likely not be able to go below, because it's just there's a bare minimum that needs to be done within the space.
Right, understood. Thanks.
Yeah, Paul, you had a question.
Well, a couple of things. First, I support this. I support its location, again, because of the commitment we made to the Douse family way back when. The drawings are beautiful. They're inviting people to share in our history. These are all good things. I was going to comment on the question of residential housing in a basement versus a library structure. a residence and private construction doesn't have to pay the prevailing wage and competitive bidding and all those requirements that public sector projects have to do. So public sector's projects usually are much more expensive than a private project in a residence. I believe the plan was to see if we could get some grants, and I recall a discussion about speaking to our congressman about getting an earmark from Congress on the theory that this history is not just of Sherborn, but part of our nation's history. And I
this
don't know
was
what happened. I wonder if I could get an update on that from Jeremy or somebody.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's reached out. I haven't heard. I'm more than willing any day. Yeah, I don't know our representatives personally, but I know some of you do. So if someone is willing to arrange a meeting, I would be happy to take it and move it forward. And this is the year, right? I mean, it's a very profound year in our country and in our town. And as you say, Paul, the two are related very much so. So I don't know if Sherborn has gotten any earmarks at the state or federal level, and this would be a perfect opportunity. So I'm happy to do whatever I can to support that and help out. But I haven't heard that anyone has actually reached out yet.
When is the next round of earmark requests due? Does anyone know? Jeremy?
I don't know, but I'll volunteer to work with you, Doug. I know Becca and James quite well, both of them.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to, Jeff. Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. And the other thing I'd say is,
Yeah,
look,
Jeff, Doug, it's Jeff speaking up.
oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. Thank
It's
you.
all right.
That would be
No
great.
worries. No worries.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And and the other thing I'd say is I really do feel that this is an investment for the town. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you all see the value, but the way and I realize it's at a tough time and we just have to do what we can do. I think on behalf of the Sherborn Historical Society, we're much more interested in the long term because we think this is going to be a profound benefit to the town. And so we want to be flexible. I mean, we feel like we have an obligation to put forward the Douse legacy and what he would want. And I'm pretty confident of what he would want. And I feel a responsibility to do that. But I feel like, this is an investing in our town. If I just take my own example, as I've learned about local history, it's gotten me much more engaged, inspired, interested in my town and wanting to be involved. And I think that's going to happen with many, many people. And, the last thing I'd say is, again, I don't want to suggest 1.2 million is not a lot of money, right? It is for people in town, but when you think about 100 years of value that the town has gotten for the use of all of these facilities, I amortize that. If the town would have, just take out a loan for that money over 30 years, it comes out to about $1.80 per month per person. And again, I know there's a lot of things that you have to fund, but giving up 3 pumpkin spice lattes would pay each person's share for a year, and so I don't know how we best convey that to the town, but I think that's the way we have to think about this as a long-term investment. So
Good point.
thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And we welcome any and all feedback anytime.
I'd like to recognize Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Just wanted to circle back on the earmark question. Sherborn was fortunate for FY24 to receive state earmarks to help celebrate your 350th. That original earmark was $50,000, and unfortunately, the Commonwealth had to cut that back to 25, I believe. For this current fiscal year, FY25, we all put in various requests, including helping to fund this fit out, among other things. At the state level, we were provided with a $50,000 earmark for water treatment. So that's the current level. at the current fiscal year at the state level that fit into their budget arrangements and what their priorities were. Generally, state earmarks were around that level of value. At the federal level, we did submit your project to the federal representatives, Representative Auchincloss. The project didn't make their cut of projects. They supported another regional project, but now is the time to get your project before them for FY26. However, that won't, you won't know that until later this year, but it's certainly the time now to do the advocating to the local representatives.
Okay, good information. I think we probably wouldn't want to put this on there. Yeah, Paul, you're next.
Just to follow up on what I was saying, I think if we don't have earmarks and we don't have some financial support elsewhere, the plan would be to essentially borrow the money over like 20 years. So 1.2 million over 20 years is 600,000 a year over 20 years. That's not, it spreads it out.
You mean 60,000?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
that's a high interest rate.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
sorry, my math is off, but it spreads the cost out. And so that as this thing gets completed and the public enjoys it, those who come after us should also share in the cost because they're sharing in the benefit. So rather than the taxpayers having to pay for everything right now, the current taxpayers, the idea of borrowing ensures that future residents of the town who will also benefit from this will also be contributing to the cost of it. So I believe the plan would be to borrow the funds, include this on our list of projects that go on our debt exclusion list. And even if approved, we'll still be looking for grants and earmarks and anything else we can do to offset the cost. And the town's been pretty good at being able to find state and federal money. We've done pretty well.
All right. And frankly, I don't even look for a longer than a 20-year loan on something like this if what do you call it, bond council would accept it. All right, anything else? All right, well, very good. Thank you very much, Doug. And the architect, what is your name? I see TSKP.
Yugon Kim.
Yukon. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. A very nice presentation, and I do hope this goes through. I really do. Maybe we have to think of some costing strategies. Maybe there's something about doing it in two halves or something. I don't know, because I agree with Paul. You put this over a long bond. Of course, it's not a whole lot a year, but then there's two things on with that. There's one. That's like every bond we do. So every bond we do has a certain lifespan to it, and it all goes onto our debt service, and the debt service goes to the budget and the overrides we've talked about before, and so on and so forth. The second thing is just sheer perception. In my day job, I do what you're doing right now, and there's something about splitting something in half just makes the politicians and the public accept it easier. Do you know what I mean? It is a strategy you may want to think about. It just a thought. All right. Again, thank you very much. A very nice presentation. And it looks like a great project as well.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
moving on. Item number 3, consideration of acceptance of a grant and donation to the Council of Aging. Christina Gallant, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, thank you.
Oh, hi, how you doing?
This will be really quick. The COA recently received a grant from the Sherborn Business Association for $1,000 to be used towards instructor expenses for a technology lifetime learning course. And we also received a $500 donation from Sherborn Duncan to be used towards our Thursday cafes and our resource fair. And I ask that you move to accept this grant and donation. Thank you.
So moved.
Right, Paul, there you go.
you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
Right.
Marion?
Aye.
And Paul?
We love grants. We love
That's right.
money.
Donations.
So
Yes.
do we. Thank you so much, all.
I might as well for the record. Okay, very good. Okay, number 4. Yeah. Sorry, moving track. Consideration of gift from DSYBS and donor of installation of lights at Jameson Field. Jameson Field 1, I guess, the little Jameson Field. Who's speaking on that? Is that
His
default
name's
to Jeremy?
Dave.
Oh, Dave? Oh,
Yeah,
all you are.
I'll be speaking on behalf of the Recreation Department and the Recreation Commission, as well as at least a start, Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball Softball. I also want to point out that their president, Scott Miles, is also joining us here tonight in support of this potential project and gift to the town. My name is Dave Welch. I'm the Recreation Coordinator for Sherborn Recreation. And the project that we're looking to share tonight is to add lighting to Jameson 1, which is also known as the Little League Field. This is the small diamond that has that's entirely fenced in with a scoreboard and press box adjacent to the tennis courts that already have lights. They're right next door. And so this project would provide the money for both the materials, which would be 4 poles and the lighting fixtures, as well as the installation costs to connect it to power so that the lights, it would effectively be handed over as a turnkey solution to the town. The funding for this project would be made possible by a major donor to Dover Sherborn Baseball Softball, as well as money from Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball Softball that they have aggregated through their own fundraising efforts over the years. I want to point out that the Dover Sherborn Baseball Softball has worked with Sherborn Recreation in the past. Most recently, for those who are not aware, in December of 2023, they were instrumental in helping us renovate that same diamond that was long overdue for improvement, and they split the cost of that renovation, saving the town of Sherborn $25,000. And so here they are. They're back with us again a little over a year later, and they brought forward this project to the Recreation Commission to share the potential of a gift to install these lights at Jameson 1. The benefits that would be shared if these lights were installed is you would have a state-of-the-art lighting system, which would effectively double the number of games that could be played on that field. Right now, most of the games are on a weeknight. You have parents who scramble back, especially in the early part of the season, to try to squeeze in at least one game. And this would allow to double the number of games, certainly during the weekday, on our town's premier ball field. It would also provide an exciting game day experience for the athletes, their families, and the general public. It would allow Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball Softball, who is a member organization with Little League Baseball, to host later round tournament games, potentially setting up home games for Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball as they compete in the Little League tournament. It also provides flexibility to Sherborn Recreation that at some point after the installation, it may allow us to consolidate the number of diamonds that we have at Jameson and make better use of the facility. Right now we have 4 diamonds. We have the opportunity to potentially go down to 3, which would allow us to focus our efforts and operational expenses over 3 diamonds instead of 4, providing a better experience, improved maintenance across the rest of the facility, beyond what's happening at the Little League fields. And there's probably other benefits that I'm missing as well, but I want to at least start with that. I do want to point out that for the funding, there is, at least from the major donor perspective that's working with Dover Sherborn Baseball Softball, time is of the essence. Their stipulation is that for their money to be available is something that would be installed and be available for use this spring. As of tonight, we're still able to stay on a timeline that would permit that, provided there were any significant delays. So I do want to disclose that, share that up front. But with that aside, without eating up too much time, I thought I would go ahead and open it up to the questions from the select board.
So just a quick one here for a second. So you need from us a vote to accept the gift? Is that what's needed from us right now?
Yes, although, I guess, from my perspective, it's to get started on, the gift is not ready, but it's based,
Okay.
I think, actually Sean's got his hand raised. I'll let him, I think he's a
Yeah,
better.
John, if you have any information, just kind of what's needed from us and the next steps.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would compare this to a couple things, but definitely the playground. We went through something similar. What we did is the select board voted to allow the project to happen. Because essentially someone's working on the property. There may be no cost to the town, but they're modifying our property. So you allow it. You want to accept it later when you're actually accepting something tangible. You're not accepting money. You're going to accept something physical, and then it's more meaningful at that point, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit more of a celebration because they'll be done. So you'd basically just be allowing them to bring contractors in to do the work. That's how I see it, at least. That's what we did with the playground and a couple other projects I can't think of right now.
That makes sense. I don't know if actually you need to accept them.
Sorry,
too.
the
Always
path.
money gifts. Yeah.
That's how we did the turf field at the high school. Also, the Marinos originally donated the turf field at the high school.
Okay.
And Pat Cassell's path.
Yeah.
Actually, Doug Cassell's.
Yes, I remember that very well. Absolutely.
So if I could make the motion to authorize the Recreation Commission and maybe DPW, whoever else, to proceed with the improvements that are outlined in the drawings that we have received.
It makes sense. Do I have a second on the board?
I have a question before.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, dialogue's still open.
I think there also has to be some kind of a legal structure that Sean alluded to, that how they can do an improvement to a municipal property. And I don't know what that's called. I forget the word.
So, if it's DPW, what's the other entity?
Say that
Like,
again.
if it's a town entity, you might not have to. But is there outside? Is there a third party? Is there like a commercial, like non-town entity that's actually physically digging, doing the work? Do we have to worry about that type of stuff, like liability? You thinking, Jeff? Or
That's what I'm
it's going to be contractors doing the work, so they have liability insurance. So that risk is the same whether, again, you're allowing them to do the work. You're not contracting them to do it.
right.
Yeah.
Somebody outside of the town is contracting them that's going to pay them.
We're not paying them.
But
So it's not like
we
we need a contract or anything like that. You know what I mean?
And we can ensure that we have liability insurance in hand for any of the contractors there, as we would with any, volunteer work.
The only thing, and I'm not trying to, believe me, I'm not trying to mess up a gift. The only thing that really could go wrong is if, like, they go bankrupt and leave it a mess before it's done or something like that. So it's the only thing that could ever really go wrong in something like this that I could think of, Insurance will cover someone an injury or whatever else. And if we did it before, I'm fine with a vote to basically allow them to do the work because I don't want to like overcomplicate and mess up a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless someone can think of something, another mechanism or something. Like, you're right. The Cassell's the one I remember. I don't remember the turf field. I wasn't on the board then, but I remember Cassell. And I think it was just like a vote to let him do it.
I think the vote I made covers it. It authorizes the Recreation Commission and DPW.
And their agents, maybe. If
And their agents. Friendly amendment accepted.
Okay. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right. All in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
All right.
Marion?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
I am I as well.
With a question, who's the donor? Can we recognize the donor and thank the donor?
Hi, this is Scott Miles, President DSYBS. we're working on them with some language on how they would like to be recognized. We're still working through the details of that, but yes, Dave Welch and I have been talking about potential opportunities for acknowledgement once we get the approval to tie it to the family name.
So you have to understand how grateful we are.
Yeah.
And the community is for people who come forward and willing to invest in our town this way by making gifts. So yes, I very much want to honor them and acknowledge them and recognize them.
Well, we certainly can work together with you on that. So we'll keep the conversation over, and via Dave, we'll get together on what makes the most sense.
Yeah, a presentation when the lights first turn on the field on some nice spring afternoon would be good.
Well, we're shooting for May 3rd for our opening day parade day to be
There
the
you
first
go.
day. So
That'd be nice to have it this summer.
that is
Absolutely.
our BHAG.
And these fields are kind of the heart of Sherborn. They really are. 45 years ago, I struck out countless times in those. I always wondered what first base felt like.
It's because there was no lights, you couldn't see the ball.
Exactly. They'll bring back my youth. I think the opposite field was already coming in by the time I got up to bat. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving on. Item number 5, discussion and a possible vote to add the annual town meeting warrant for a local recall provision. I'll start with Jeremy. And just, we had a short discussion 2 weeks ago, but we held off the vote because the full board wasn't there. We're now here to basically continue or really have a more thorough discussion and hopefully collect a vote. And Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a summary to build on what Eric mentioned. You discussed briefly at your last meeting, included in your packet this evening. However, in addition to the samples that we've collected from the research for your last meeting, there's a copy of, and just for your reminder, folks, many of you folks were there in 2017 at the special town meeting. There were 2 warrant articles that were considered by town meeting at the time. One was a citizen's petition, and one was a select board warrant article that both considered a recall provision for the community. In both cases, town meeting decided to take no action. Just for your reference, the advisory report with the wording of those warrant articles is included in your packet this evening, along with the other information from the other communities that we found. It seems that about 50% of Massachusetts communities have some form of a recall provision. And as you know, to have a recall provision requires special legislation. Basically, you need town meeting to approve your select board to pursue that special legislation at the State House in Boston. So just a brief summary and a little more information, Eric.
And just a quick thing, I did a little bit more research since our last meeting on it. I think it's mostly the real small rural communities that don't have it. I think most communities, I bet you if you looked it up, and I just did a quick smattering of ones, if you look most, let's say inside of 495, I think it's well more than half the communities have some kind of recall provision. It's something I support. I think it has, accountability, with elected officials. And I think it's a good check and balance. It's not something taken lightly. I did a quick little research, and in the last 8 years, there's never been more than like 5 recall provisions done across the state. There was like 5 in 18, 3 in 19, 4 in 2020, 3 in 2021, 5 in 2022, 5 in 2023, and only 2 in 2024. So I think it's like, based on some of the research I've done, it's not something that's done really too egregiously. It's not something that's done lightly. And I think it's just, especially this board being an elected board, I think it's important that we have accountability as well as all the elected boards. To basically, you could have someone be pretty egregious on one of these boards and have no ramifications for 3 full years. And it's something that, again, I support. Marianne, go ahead.
Yeah, this is something I could support, but I'm still on the fence on this. I'd like to do more research, and I think there's a lot more to learn from other communities. My concern is that just being subject to a recall, even if the recall was never voted, is very damaging to a person. And in a small town like ours, it's a pretty sensitive sort of procedure. My first, I guess my off-the-cuff response is, later in this agenda, we're going to be discussing revitalizing our governance committee. And I think that might be something that the governance committee might do research on and give advice on as well. So that's just something to consider.
Thanks, yeah. But I'd also counter to you that keep in mind that you're right, it could be damaging, but an elected official that has misintent can do a lot more damage. You know what I mean?
I
And
totally
you look at
agree.
the numbers of how rarely this is actually executed across a state. I don't hold that same concern. I think it's one of the things where it's like it's not going to be used lightly. I think we can put the right mechanisms. You talk about other communities, the majority of communities inside of 495 do this. This is definitely not reinventing the wheel. We're not doing anything new here whatsoever. We are the outlier by not having one. Really, something like that. You look at all these articles, I've read probably about 10 of them. They're all pretty much the same nature. There's some things about how many signatures you need and things like that, which I think we can discuss those details. But I mean, the overall, what do you call it? Intent or execution of this, I don't think is as big a deal as you might imply there.
So,
I really do. This is a pretty standard type article.
so
Paul, you're next.
great. Because I listened to the recording of the last meeting and have a lot of comments to make. I'm opposed to this, and here's why. Sherborn has always been based on volunteers, unpaid volunteers who willingly step forward to give back to our community. Yet, today we have unfilled town positions, and the town caucus committee scrambles every year to find candidates for all the elected positions. This article would make it very hard to find volunteers. Recalls have the effect of permanently damaging reputations, such that any volunteer who is subject to a recall will be hugely harmed personally. Every time after a recall, a volunteer applies for a job or seeks a promotion at work, every time a background check is done on that volunteer, what will come up? What will come up is that hundreds of people signed a petition that the volunteer is incompetent or has poor judgment. Even if that person is not recalled, the damage is done. Google and social media search engines have forever tagged that volunteer with career-ending labels. And at the time that most of the communities have adopted these things, the internet and social media wasn't anything like it is today. So experience shows that the most frequent form of recall are the result of personality conflicts, where a multi-member board has members that can't get along and get angry at each other, forgetting the basic principle that we can disagree without being disagreeable. Anger leads to personal attacks that then spills over to recalls. A person facing a recall can respond to the recall by doing a counter recall. That is, a person who has been named in a recall petition files a counter petition to recall those board members who initiated the first recall. So both sides will end up alleging incompetence or poor judgment and the like. with the possible result, the whole board is now before the board for recall, and with the possible result that everyone is recalled on the basis of the voters saying, stop behaving like children, or no one is recalled, but everyone is tarnished by the process. These are the nastiest of campaigns, full of personal accusations. There is a less frequent type of recall that I've seen, which is financially driven. Someone who is an activist citizen who has been denied some permit or relief by a regulatory board and who wants to get his or her way with financial gain to be pocketed from some permit or some relief, brings a recall against the board that is frustrating the person initiating the recall. Before this board puts such an article on the warrant, there are some steps that we would have to make in order to protect our regulatory boards. Before the board puts such an article on the warrant, we would have to make sure that our regulatory boards, like the planning board and the Board of Health, are converted to appointed boards, not elected. That is an absolutely necessary foundation before we ever get to this discussion. This board is putting the cart before the horse, doing this all prematurely. There are no guardrails that work. Experience shows that people will sign petitions when asked by a friend, and the usual presentation to obtain signatures on a recall is the statement by the signature collector that this petition doesn't do anything other than only letting the voters decide, and it's all good for democracy, and so on and so on. So many times afterwards in a recall situation, we hear that voters saying they never understood what they were signing. It's just amazing to me to listen to people say, I didn't know what I was signing. Experience also shows that recall election is not about the truth or falsity of the stated reasons for the recall, but is simply a popularity contest. All the recall provisions allow for a statement of the reasons for the recall, like incompetence, for example. You want to do a recall because somebody is incompetent. There is no committee or court that judges whether the stated reasons are true or not. A petition alleging a person is incompetent or exercising poor judgment, how would the person subject to such a petition ever prove the negative, that he or she is not incompetent? Instead, the experience is that voters go with who is popular.
All right.
So here are possible examples. Here are just, I
I thought you were done, Paul. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Here are examples of possible recalls in Sherborn if this passes. 1, the town is hiring a new town administrator and decides on candidate A, a non-resident of the town. Candidate B lives in town, has many supporters, and files a recall petition that those who voted for candidate A are incompetent. We end up with the voters voting on which they like better, candidate A or candidate B, leaving board members with ruined reputations behind. Example 2, the town is firing a major department head who lives in town with many supporters. The fire department head files a recall petition that all those who voted to terminate be recalled. We end up with an election voting on the popularity of that department head, while the hands of the appointing authority are tied, as they cannot say all the reasons that led to the termination. Item example 3, the town seeks an override or a tax increase, and the question is defeated. But certain voters decide that those town officials who supported the tax increase need to be punished. So we have an election on the merits of overrides versus spending cuts, with ruined town officials left in the wake. Example 4, a regulatory board applies the law strictly to protect all of us, but an applicant believes the results are too strict and files a recall petition to recall the board members as being incompetent and too strict. And we now have an election on whether or not there should be more development or less development, again, with ruined lives left behind.
I mean, to shut you short, but do you have more of these examples? I mean, we get your example. Different scenarios.
I listened to what you said,
all right,
Eric, at the beginning of this meeting and at the prior meeting. So please, I was not at the prior meeting, so I should have.
Nope, continue your examples.
Of 2 meetings to speak on this. Sherborn is too small a town for us to add this disruptive, and divisive feature. At the last board meeting, Andover was cited as an example of a town with a recall provision, but Andover has 36,485 people, while Sherborn has 4,409. We have just celebrated our 350th anniversary, and those 350 years have been without the need of a recall provision. In the past, in this town, if we felt someone was not being effective, we simply sat down with them, reasoned with them, and the right thing was done voluntarily and amicably, because we are a small town and because we all know each other, we all work with each other. The issue of recalls have come up in the past, and in the past numerous times. This has already been determined not to be a good idea for the town of Sherborn. We have a citizen article for a government study committee to review our form of government that will be on the warrant for adoption by the voters. This recall idea should be rejected at this point in the process, and let's leave that issue to the government study committee to consider and process. Please do not do this destructive thing by jumping the gun and putting this on the warrant at this point in time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions, Paul, because I've gone back and I've looked at some past votes, and I've looked at, like I said, it's only done a handful of times of the 200 plus communities that have recall provisions each year. There's one example I can see where there was a recall in one town, another one the next year. That's all I can find in the last 10 years. You said that this is used as a retaliatory measure sometimes. Do you have any examples of communities where there's been a retaliatory recall, where someone's done one and then someone else has done one back, just like you said?
So because I've been counsel on some of these recalls, which is why I feel it's such a destructive thing, I don't want to disclose. I don't want to answer that question.
How about the financial ones? Was reason for sanction? You said you've seen examples with financial. Do you have any? Is it just one community you work for, or do you have actual examples?
Yes, but again, I don't want to identify.
Because you gave a bunch of theoretical examples for Sherborn there. Have you seen anything similar to those those examples you gave of Sherborn that could happen?
Yes. Can
you say what they are? Because I've gone back and done research, and I can't find anything like that based on what I've seen. Anyways, there were pretty extreme examples you said there. I'd be honest with you, Paul, I have my doubts that would happen. And those examples you gave of Sherborn were like, if you hire the wrong town administrator, I don't think you're demonstrating trust in the Sherborn residents there. And I actually don't believe Sherborn would actually do a recall on someone, or someone would say, I don't know what I was signing, and things like that. I think you can, excuse me, Paul. I think you can make protections, you can make necessary signature requirements, and I think it's extremely common act to have, extremely common bill. And I just don't think those theoretical examples of which you can't cite actually are going to happen in Sherborn. I really don't. You put enough signatures on there and you do whatever. I don't think our residents are going to get mad at someone for hiring the wrong person or going to what do you call it? Be retaliatory or not know what the signings a neighbor gives to them. Maybe you got like 10 signatures that way, but not like 70 or 80. And I just disagree with you that those examples are realistic and that would even happen. I mean, not happen at all, much less in Sherborn. That's my thought on it. You can respond, but then obviously we have a lot of hands raised here.
Okay, so we can agree to disagree on that, but I do trust the voters when they elected somebody to the office. And it's actually a pretty short term. 3 years go by pretty fast. I mean, compare that to Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. Those U.S. senators have enormous power. They're in office for 6 years. There's no recall on them. There's no recall on so many other different levels of government. All of a sudden, here in the little town of Sherborn, we don't have issues of great moment. We're not, there's not war and peace and health of the nation, all that kind of stuff. Suddenly, we have to have something that the founding fathers never thought needed to be in place for the national government. Well, that's enough for
All right.
let me hear what other people have to say and respond.
Stephen, go ahead.
So I actually think that Paul makes a lot of good points, and they are worth thinking about, worth discussing for sure. I guess my opinion is that number one, you say that, well, it just turns into a popularity contest, and all elections are popularity contests, right? I mean, each time all five of us were elected, it was effectively a popularity contest, right? And you could basically say that for every elected official in this town. So getting elected in the first place is a popularity contest, and if you get recalled, then I mean, I don't know. I don't see how the mechanism is categorically different there. I think that if you were to, not that I'm advocating for this, but I mean, what are our town elections? We get what, like 300 voters each time, So if you made the signature requirement high enough, let's say it was 150, 200, essentially it's like you would have to have already enough votes to succeed in the recall before you could even put it forth. I mean, it's not going to be something frivolous. Again, I'm not advocating that the threshold be 200, but again, that's a number that we can set, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like this is something that is worthy of putting on the warrant and having a discussion and letting it go through the advisory committee, letting it go through the public hearing, and obviously letting it go through the town meeting process and a vote. This was brought up whatever it was, 2016. And actually Jeff and I were both on the advisory committee at that time. There were two different versions of the recall provision. And effectively the reasoning behind advisory's rejection of the two of them, it was different. One of them, they said, actually this one's too restrictive, and then the other version was like, actually this one's a little bit too open. And effectively the advisory comment was like, recall provision seems like a good idea and we should revisit this, and we just need more thought to be put into the details of it. And for what it's worth, I was actually one of the two people that was on the minority report for that recall. So whatever was written in the minority report, that's what I support. Essentially, I believed back then, and I believe now, that a recall provision is worthwhile. So again, I personally think it's worthwhile, but certainly at minimum, I think it is worth putting on the warrant for the residents to discuss and vote on as a whole. I don't think it is our place to decide that the residents shouldn't even be allowed to discuss or vote on it.
Good point. Good point. Frank, I'm gonna put you on hold because I'm gonna hear from the rest of the board. Then I'll take the general public thing, just so you know. I do want to add that just the optics of like this elected board keeps this from going to the town meeting is just terrible optics. It's like feels so self-serving. It feels like the general court saying we don't want an audit. You know what I mean? It's just as terrible as I can imagine.
It should go to the government study committee.
Marion, you're next.
Yeah, exactly. Paul just said what I was going to say. It should go to the governance study committee that we're about to reform, and it should be decided by the town. I note that, I think it's very unlikely to be exercised in Sherborn if we make the guardrails sufficient. But as you've said before, more or less in different ways, the test is in the guardrails. And there already are guardrails from the state, I believe. The State Ethics Commission, Paul knows better what those guardrails are. If you look at the training that we all do, it's clear that the state has those laws in place. In any case, I think the fact that so few recalls actually go through, tells you that if there, it's a rare thing in all these towns in Massachusetts, much bigger towns, much more people. It's still rare. So I'm not worried about Sherborn, whether we have a recall provision or not. But I am a bit worried about the potential damage that could be done by a recall that's an unsuccessful call for a recall, because the guardrails aren't sufficiently justified. The person who's recalled, even if it's not actually, even if it's not, if it doesn't actually go
Fails.
through,
Yeah.
it's still, yeah, if it fails, it's still, it's still a mark on a person, as Paul says. So I could go either way, but I think it should go to the governance committee.
I will say though that I don't think they're a state guardrail. So the state's ethics committee can come, they can monitor someone, they can find someone, and you're still an elected official. You're still making decisions and voting, even if you're found guilty. If anything has, there's no way to actually remove someone. If someone has misintent, they're actually there and doing the wrong thing. That's the only scenario I could really imagine. I don't buy into Paul's thing, or someone's not popular, or someone makes a bad decision, or someone doesn't hire the right person. The really only time I believe in Sherborn this will be done is someone is shown to have misintent. If someone has misintent, there's no guardrails. There's not at the state level. The
Well,
state
well
can come and
then,
fine you. I've
yeah,
seen it happen where a state can come and actually fine someone. Anyways, that's Jeremy. The whole thing with like a bunch of these people went on some ski trip and they're getting fined, and they all kept their jobs. And the elected ones kept on there. People in water commissions. Okay, Jeff, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that, hey, we're not lucky enough to get a recall on the select board, but
I encourage somebody to recall me.
Oh, seriously.
I guarantee it's not going to affect my job.
my second point is this seems like a solution in search of a problem to me. If you said it's so rare, I find it to be unnecessary, so I wouldn't vote for it. But I think what Paul suggested of waiting and letting, if we do have the group that does the governance task force, let them weigh in on that. We would be foolish not to get their greater research on what it is. But once again, I find this to be unnecessary in Sherborn myself. But
I mean, it's unnecessary now, but like I said, someone with misintent can do a lot of damage. That's all I'll say. You know what I mean?
well, they
That's the only
can,
time
but
I can see something
the
like
way
this being used.
politics is working now, particularly in Washington, people are manipulating these kind of things. You know what I mean? Like,
Don't use the
book
last 3
ban-
days as any example of Sherborn.
book bans and deciding what books can be in a library and things like that. There's crazy people out there that are doing, things that you and I wouldn't have conceived of even trying to do. So I don't know.
Eric, can I jump in with one comment?
Yeah, you then I'll
General
recognize
public?
Frank Hess. So yeah, give him one.
Yeah, so So I would also be in support of sort of letting the governance task force have at this. I mean, I'm going to vote in favor of this right now anyways. I guess one question I have for Paul is that, are you saying it should be the governance task force because you're just kicking that can down the road? Or if they look at it and come back and make the recommendation to actually do it, are you then going to be in favor of it? Or are you just saying that so that it delays this further?
There's two answers to that. The first is, the point I'm trying to make is that some of us are employed, and some of us, if you're subject to a recall, it's going to affect your job. And maybe it doesn't affect your job, Stephen. I think you said it wouldn't affect your job. But our job is not to protect one select board member. There are people in this community, they have responsible jobs. And if anything, what makes Sherborn different from other communities is we have a lot of people here who have some really responsible jobs. We can't recruit them. We will not be able to recruit them to serve this community with this kind of thing here. So I'm not in favor of it, even if the Government Study Committee supports it. But it should not be coming out of the Board of Selectmen one way or the other. It should be, we have that article on the warrant. They have enough signatures to have it on the warrant. It will be on the warrant. I'm going to be supporting the Government Study Committee. Let them look at it. I would like to speak to them on this. I do a lot of charter reform work for other communities. This has always been a disaster for every community who's gotten involved with this. They need to know that.
I got a call on that one. Every community that has these, so the vast majority of communities inside of 495, this has been disastrous for them. I did a fair amount of research in the last 8 years, Paul. That's a lot of hyperbole there. You're really going to say that this has been a disaster for like every community that has a recall provision?
If you're talking about a community where the average worker is a McDonald's waiter, there probably is no adverse effect. But that's not Sherborn. Our job is to look out for Sherborn. So comparing us to cities, big towns, towns with different history, different background, it's just way off. I don't agree with any of that.
And Frank, I swear I'm going to recognize you, but I have to respond to this. I'm not. I just can't say enough how much. I mean, we are, like you said, run by volunteers, like pretty much every town around here. Some more than others. You know, those under 10,000 tend to be run more by volunteers, and those above 10 tend to be a bit more appointed and so on like that, and hired staff. I get that. We've had contested races in almost every elected, and the ones that are open right now are not the elected, the appointed as well. Look at even library trustees. You look at select board. You look at Board of Health have all had contested races and in very recent years. I'm just not as worried about that. I just, give one last strong thing where it's just to have this board, an elected board, stop this from going to advisory and stop this from going to town meeting and going to the people to vote. I just think it's so inappropriate. But okay, Frank, I'm just gonna recognize you before anyone talks because otherwise we're gonna go on.
Okay, please recognize Nancy. Her hand raising feature isn't working.
Oh, that's funny. So yeah, you raise your hand. Okay, that's smart. That's really smart. Yes, Nancy, please go ahead.
In 2018, I wrote, with council's oversight, the elected financial officials recall provision, which was supported by advisory, passed by town meeting, and by the state legislature, and I learned a lot. Before subjecting the town and or any individual to a recall vote, there should be a similar process in place to determine whether or not the issues of concern rise to the level of a recall ballot. As everybody has said, recall is very disruptive to the functioning of town government, divisive to the population, discourages volunteer participation, and can become very political. It can levy a significant cost at both the town and the subject. It can be very harmful to both the town and to the individual subject to the process. I have lived through some very divisive things here in Sherborn. In 2018, we set an independent process with a committee appointed with the exact goal of creating trust and avoiding politics and/or a witch hunt. The committee would review the documents from the accuser and the defense take their testimony and determine if the facts demonstrate whether there was a pattern of errors, omissions, negligence, or dishonesty, or the subject may have committed an act so egregious that the act may put the well-being of the town at risk. Town council would be there to advise, and the subject would be allowed to bring their own counsel. Unlike the finance official recall, a committee for this purpose would decide whether or not to put the recall to a ballot. The accuser would then be required to collect the signatures from a certain percent of the voters to move it forward, taking some of the unpleasantness out of the process from the beginning. And then if they determine that there is a problem, then they go and politicize it by collecting signatures and all of that. If indeed you do vote to do a recall, I think that you really do need to put some guardrails in place. And I think having a committee review the whole issue first is one of those guardrails. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Can
Pam.
I add to that? Just
Okay,
comment.
respond, Paul, but I really want to recognize Pam.
So the laws of the state give people the right to sue for libel and slander and so on, but not in the case of a recall, because what you put on that piece of paper as your reasons, because it's part of the petitioning activity protected by the US Constitution and so on, there's no recourse. So the most scandalous, false set of lies can go on that recall petition. And as I say, it can be picked up by Google. So even if you are in California and want to buy a car, somebody can pull that up and see that 100 people in Sherborn thought you were a crook. There's no protection for the individual. And that's what kills, that's what's going to kill volunteerism in this town.
All right, Pam.
First, I just want to say that I don't like the generalizations of how important Sherborn's occupations are compared to other towns. That's really embarrassing. And I just don't think that ever should have been said on a public meeting. I'm horrified that it was said. And if it's good enough to go to the governance task force for people to vote on it, that's just a handful of Sherborn residents. Why can't every Sherborn resident be able to vote on whether that's something that we all want? You guys as an elected board just need to be careful, because it could be seen that you guys don't want this because you're an elected board. So you just have to be careful. If it's good for governance task force to evaluate, then it should be good for all of Sherborn to evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, Jackie. Yeah, you muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I can unmute.
I just wanted to let you know that I am in favor of this. I think that the town should be able to vote. I think working with town council that we could make the parameters very tight so that it's not just, oh, I didn't like that you didn't approve my, variance or whatever. I'm talking about elected officials that are not following the ethics rules, not following the conflict of interest rules. That's the kind of stuff that I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about someone, like I said, they didn't like the ruling that they had. That's not what this is supposed to be about. This is about I think serious ethics violations, et cetera. And I think that the town should be able to vote on it. And I think with town council, you can make the parameters very tight. I don't agree that the signature should be 25 people or even 80 people. I think it should be something like 200 because it is a very serious thing. And so make it tight, make the, and just make it difficult. Don't make it just so that's just some willy-nilly, because I didn't like what you said at the last meeting. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
And that's a history. That's what it's been shown here.
Can I ask one quick question of Jackie, actually?
Oh yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Just because it will often get brought up that running an election, holding an election is costly. Do you know, just ballpark, what is the cost of running one town election?
Yeah, the police is about $1,000. It's probably around 3 or 4 grand.
Okay.
With the police and then ordering ballots. And you know, most of the people are volunteers, but some I do have to pay. But it's mostly police and ordering ballots, and then the chip for the machine. So it'd be probably about 3 or 4,000.
Okay.
And that's a good question, Stephen, because I'll say that, elected official can do a lot more than 3 or 4 grand of damage in a short amount of time. Nora.
Hi, I wasn't really planning on saying anything, but I think a quick remedy to this, not really quick, would be term limits. I mean, I think that solves a lot of it, because if you have term limits, whether it's
And term limits is something I would like to consider at some point. Only problem with term limits is that you still got someone in there for 3 years that can do a lot of damage. You know what I mean? I think there are actually extremes, and I think it's rarely be used. You have extreme circumstances where an elected official can do a fair amount of damage in a thing. The only issue I have with term limits, and I don't want to talk too much about it because it's kind of off the subject matter, is what Paul said. We have trouble getting volunteers for a lot of things like this. And I joke, but I'm not joking, that this town's run by 30 people who just do multiple hats. It really is. Do you know what I mean? That when you do the term limits, it's kind of like you kind of need someone good to stay on. You know what I mean? When you have someone who shouldn't be recalled to stay on.
I can tell you, I know a lot of people that if they were just asked, they would step up.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I just had to say it. Thank you.
All right. Corinna. Yeah, Ms. Lincoln, please go ahead. You're muted, by the way.
Corey, you're muted.
You're muted, Corey. Corey, muted. And let me unmute you. I can do it up here.
I don't think you can.
Well, you
No,
can
I have to ask to
it'll-
unmute. That's
yeah.
right.
But it'll pop something up on her screen. I
Yeah,
think.
me, I'll do it. I'll do
Oh,
a
yeah,
thing
no,
that says
you're
ask.
good now, Corey.
Okay.
Got it now.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one little point. I wanted to reassure Pam that the task force does not have the authority to make binding decisions of anything. They just make recommendations. So even if they were in favor or not in favor, that wouldn't be the end of it. It would.
Yes, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of conclude that with this. I think, Stephen asked Paul a great question, and pretty much no matter what they say, Paul's going to vote against it. And I think people have made up their mind to some extent. To me, the task force, they're good things. They make sense with structure, and I'm going to support the task force moving forward at this next town meeting. This is a standard law that the vast majority of towns inside of 495 have. It's no different than any other bylaw that we do. And I think our town council could come forward with something pretty simple and to kick the can down the road just because you don't like it. I just don't think that you're going to get anything more out of it. I personally know that this town council has dealt with other recall laws for other towns and multiple towns. And I just think that I'm willing to go that direction. And I think it should go to this should go to the voters. I talk about bad optics. I think it's even worse than bad optics to have this board stop a very standard like recall provision to go to town meeting, go to advisory. So although I don't think I have the votes, I'm going to make a motion that we direct the town administrator to work with town council to draft a sample recall provision that we can bring forward to discuss and eventually bring forward to advisory and a town meeting. We can work out the details when we see a draft between like number of signatures and other provisions like that. I looked at many examples and they're all very, very similar. One was a little different, but really the rest were very similar. So I'm going to make that motion that we direct Jeremy to do that. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All right. Let's see how this goes. I think it's important to collect this vote among this board. All in favor, Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yay.
Marion.
Not necessarily opposed to it, but I don't agree with Pam at all. I think that having the governance task force evaluate it and give the voters more information on how to make the decision would be useful. So I would consider it for an election the following year, or a warrant article with more data. But right now I'm a nay.
All right. Marion.
I would also say nay for now, but I think it's worth discussing for a following year because I don't think we're ready to define the parameters, the guardrails clearly enough before we would have to for this town meeting. And I think it needs more time. I don't think we're in any danger in the next year of disaster if we don't have this. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Leave it up to the town and let the governance task force do research and provide their perspectives.
All right. I mean, I'll just simply well, I'm not gonna counter that. You know what I think. And Paul, how are you gonna vote?
Well, I'm going to vote no, and I wanted to add that I believe that the future members of the government study committee are listening or are aware of this, and I would expect them to, when established, would be looking at this, and let's see what they come up with.
All right, I'm gonna vote aye or yes or whatever it is to go with it. So fails 3-2. To go to advisory and to go to town meeting for further vetting. All right, next up, review and discussion of draft warrant articles for this year. You're up, Jeremy.
Sure. So as you determined in one of your prior meetings, your warrant closed today. You did receive one citizen's petition to reconvene the governance study committee. There are 23 other warrant articles on the draft list, which is included in your packet. There was a late, just under the wire request from the Board of Assessors to include a warrant article, which is not on the list in your packet. That was received at 4:15 today. That is to add a warrant article for the town to adopt a provision of Mass General Law that would set a minimum of a $7,000 limit on property taxes. Personal property taxes that they collect. Essentially, they believe anything below that value costs more to collect than the value received, apparently. So you've currently got 23 warrant articles. In that is one citizen's petition. At future town meeting, at future select board meetings, you will get and need to vote on the actual warrant article language. So that'll be coming at a future select board meeting. You also need to vote, your position on the warrant articles at future meetings. You'll see at the bottom of the table a spreadsheet that's in your packet. There were 3 warrant articles that you had been considering but had no consensus on. One you just had made some consensus on, that being the local recall provision. But you had previously discussed a public meeting recording bylaw and a town meeting quorum change. Currently, those 2 are not in that 23. So if you, as a select board, would like to sponsor and include either of those, the recording bylaw or the town meeting quorum, we could include that in the draft or not. I included in yellow because I didn't feel like you had developed consensus yet.
So could I speak on one of them?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So on the town meeting quorum thing, that's tied up with the issue of virtual meetings, all of which expires on March 31st. And we're working on trying to have virtual meetings and quorum reduction continue after March 31. There's just some disagreement about whether or not there should be conditions and some restrictions and all of that stuff that's still being sorted out. So it's being worked on, and sometime within the next 60 days, hopefully it will all get renewed and go forward. The point of that background is that right now we have the ability to reduce the quorum based on whatever circumstances might exist at the time of town meeting. After March 31, I can't guarantee that we're going to have that ability. I'm projecting, and I'm told from various legislators it's likely that that'll continue, but I can't guarantee it. So if you want and feel that there should be a lower number for a quorum, the sure way to do it is not to leave it to that statute, but rather change the quorum. Right now, the quorum is at 100. We're a pretty small town. 100 is actually a bigger percent, if you will, of our community than 100 would be in some of the bigger communities. And if you look at, I think there was a chart prepared of what the quorum was in different places. If you look at it, I mean, there are communities, 20,000, 16,000, and all these big numbers that have less ratio of total, like Ayer has 6,000 people, but a quorum of 50. So given the small size of the town, 100 may be a little high. We may want to think about 50 or 75 or some reduced number. Just a thought. Just want to give you that background.
And I've supported reduced quorum. I always have every year. It's it's a shame when like this town meeting. In fact, let me say this. I want to make sure we're doing exactly what I asked us not to do earlier. I don't want to stick to citizen petition in the back. Everyone just takes off, and then we get 5 people voting or whatever. I'd like to reduce the quorum. I think it'll make more people to show up, knowing that only so many people are determined the fate of things, and people just they leave after their article's done, and we struggle that every single year. We have like second days just for citizen petitions. I'm saying it again. It's going to be like the 6th time I've said this. Do not put the citizen petitions at the end this year. They are not going to be at the end. Put them somewhere in the middle. Put them like 1, 10, and like 12 or whatever it is, and put all the school stuff at like 15. And then we're going to actually have people staying around and voting at town meeting. Jeff's laughing and hiding his laughter.
I think you have to tell Mike Giammo that, right? Doesn't the moderator determine the order?
No.
You
Oh,
do
no?
when you set the
We
warrant.
do.
When you vote the warrant article language, you'll set the numbering.
Oh,
It can't be changed at town meeting by your bylaw.
super.
So Eric, would you consider a generic article? It would be to see if the town will vote to modify the quorum requirement for the town without setting a number tonight or trying to reach agreement on a number, but just have that as an open question and have some dialogue continue on that with advisory and with the moderator and get a sense, particularly as we get closer to town meeting, about is there going to be another pandemic? Is it going to be whatever the circumstances are?
Yeah, I'll support a permanent lowering of it. We can leave the numbers up to whatever. I have a number in my head, but we can talk about it. I would absolutely support something. How about other people from the board?
Oh yeah, I would support. But I
That
guess
sounds like-
do we have to reopen the warrant and then put it on and then close the warrant again?
Isn't it closing tonight? When does it close? Does it close like 4 p.m.? Did it close like an hour ago?
Closed at 5 from your previous meeting.
I don't know why we do that. We got to make it like at the end of like
midnight.
midnight of our meeting.
We needed to set a deadline.
Can I move to open the warrant to add an article that would say to see if the town will vote to amend the quorum requirement for town meetings or to see, or any other action related thereto.
Yeah, sure. Do we want to also discuss the other one? What was the other one again, Jeremy?
It was the public meeting recording bylaw. That was the result, you recall, in the past year, there was a select board policy regarding meetings and meeting recordings of regulatory boards. Paul provided a sample of a bylaw in another community that he brought forward to consider. So it's related to that, whether the town should adopt a bylaw to formalize essentially what's your policy currently.
So the issue, just to expand on that, the board felt that we should have a policy set for all boards and committees in the town. And we only have legal authority to set policy for ourselves and to lead by example and ask everybody else to follow our guidance. But there is a method to make it a townwide requirement. So it would apply to the school committee, would apply to the Board of Library Trustees, everybody. And that's the alternative. So I gave you the language of what that would look like. I don't think we need to do anything on it because I think the problem has corrected itself. I don't think that there's a continuing problem in the town. And if there's not a continuing problem in the town, why add more regulations when there isn't a problem? It's a solution looking for a problem, as Jeff had said before.
But the same thing with the recall bylaw. I think it's like, when you have a problem, it's too late. So yeah, we had a certain issue. We talked about it. The issue kind of resolved itself. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen again next year, the year after that, year after that. And I'll be honest, this one I'm not quite sure, how I'm going to vote on. I'd like to talk more details about it, but I do think it's like this one's not as common. Like the recall is very common. This one I'm not as sure about because I don't know how many towns have these. I guess Paul provided an example. I have to admit I haven't looked at details. I want to talk about the details of that there. I'm just trying to think of like unintended consequences with this. But like, in fact, we had a problem means we probably will have one again. You know what I mean? Yeah, it resolved itself, but we couldn't resolve it. We couldn't fix it for the full cycle of town meeting. I don't know. What are other people's thoughts on the recording issue? I see Sean's note. We still got to vote to open the warrant, but we can still talk about this. We can still discuss, open the warrant, vote on the two things, and then close it or whatever. Marion, what are your thoughts?
Right. It was maybe a year ago now. I did a bunch of research trying to work with Jeremy on putting together a policy for recording, which we did put together for the select board and the major regulatory boards, select board, Concom, Board of Health, advisory, and
planning board.
And planning board, yes, thank you. And we got that written up as a select board, as a policy, but it has no teeth, really. So is the intent here, well, the intent seems to be twofold, and I'm not sure I have straight what you would want to happen. One vanilla option is to just make that policy that we already advertised before a part of the town bylaws.
Yes.
So that those 5 regulatory boards are required to record.
Yeah.
That was the intent. The thing I gave you had a list of like 20 committees.
Yeah.
We don't even have committees that many committees. We can't find people to serve on 20 committees.
Right. So the intent is to make official the policy, which was the best we could do at the time. Yes. All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure about that long list. I said, oh, that's not going to work.
Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm ambivalent on this one. Again, because we have a select board sort of policy, even though it doesn't have a lot of teeth. But there isn't currently a major issue. I am often cognizant of sort of length of warrant and not wanting to bog down the town meeting with a bunch of useless discussion. I feel like there will be a lot of discussion on this, but maybe that automatically makes it worthwhile. I'm not sure, but to me, it feels like the type of thing where maybe in a year where we have a shorter warrant, that might be something to put in. But if somebody felt strongly that this was something worthy of discussion and vote this year, then I would be in support of it.
Yeah, I'm similar to you, Stephen. I'm like 60% for it. If it came up, someone made a motion, I would vote for it, but I want to put a few things on. Like, for example, we have some pretty small committees. I'm trying to think. Ones where
Forests and trails.
maybe
Oh, yeah,
historical
that's
society.
not even a
That's not
committee.
even a committee, yeah. But imagine that, I don't know, the recycling committee or something, you know, if they
Something like
decide,
that. And there's Charles Tyler right there. Yeah,
right,
like
if they
recycling
decide to
committee.
meet in person, now they have to meet in a place that has recording and they have to record it. And I'm just like, whoa, are you serious?
Yeah,
I
I
almost
think
want
we're talking about two different things here. Are we going to put into, as a bylaw, the 5 regulatory boards that we, I think, do agree should be recorded?
Yeah.
It's important to record. Never mind the other 20 that are listed.
Yeah.
That's one thing. If we want to talk about the other 20, then that's a different discussion. But
That's a good way to put parameters around it. I actually would support right now a bylaw for the 5 regulatory boards. I think it's important enough. It makes enough impact on citizens. I'm not super vehement about it. I'm not like I am with the recall, but I would, if someone made a motion, I would probably vote for it. And this is this discussion. So what we should do is vote to open the warrant, make motions about this, and man, I've killed too many brain cells. What was the one we were just talking about like 5 minutes ago?
Quorum.
Quorum.
Meeting quorum.
Yeah, I feel like I should be recalled.
Well, Paul made a motion, but I've already forgotten what his motion was.
The motion was the town meeting quorum issue, but but Eric wanted to talk about the other one and combine the two. So why don't we stick to the town meeting quorum thing for the time being?
Well, let's do a standalone to open the warrant. Do you want to make a motion just to open the warrant, Paul? And everyone talk?
Yeah, open the warrant.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. All right, now let's talk about the quorum.
So the quorum motion was insert into the warrant for the town meeting an article that would read to see if the town will vote to amend the quorum requirement for town meetings.
Okay.
Or take any other action related thereto.
All right, do I have a second on that one?
Second.
Okay. I support that as well. Say all in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. Very good. Do I have any further discussion on the other one?
The recording.
Recording bylaw.
Somebody make a motion. It's not going to be me.
If there's no motion,
I should say that when I was kind of researching other towns and through the MAPC on this question, when Jeremy was putting this together, a number of other towns said, "Oh, we need a bylaw like that. Let us know, let us know how it works out, or we need a policy. We don't have it," because we were all sort of adapting to the new reality together, and it would be, I think, really helpful to make this a bylaw rather than just a policy that has no teeth.
Well, I can't write it on the fly here because I don't know the 5 committees that we had mentioned. I don't have it in front of me, but I could make a motion as a courtesy to you. A motion to put on the warrant an article that would codify the select board policy on recordings for regulatory boards.
Thank you. Perfect. I second.
All right. All in favor, Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. Wait, very good. Now, Jeremy, is there anything else we need on this list to check off on this list here for the town meeting?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, good.
I think there's too many zoning articles. And that's not based on the substance of the zoning articles. It's just that I know town meetings. I mean, I've been going to town meetings in Sherborn for a long time and haven't missed one in a long time. Having 5 lengthy zoning articles and one of them being the MBTA zoning,
Yeah.
this is too many. It's going to make a 2-night town meeting, or has the potential of making a 2-night town meeting. So I'm wondering if we could ask the planning board to do something to reduce that number. I know the MBTA thing, time-wise, is probably time sensitive. There they have 2 articles. But miscellaneous zoning bylaw updates, I mean, do we have to do that? I mean, so I'm just wondering if somebody could have a conversation with the planning board to see if we could simplify the warrants for this town meeting.
Well, I will say, and I'll recognize you in a second, Marion, because I know a little bit something about these. I've been to a couple planning board meetings. The updates are pretty administrative. I don't think there's any substance of it. And I'll check with Heidi that myself, or maybe Jeremy, if you don't mind. I should say to check on that. I thought there wasn't anything substantive. And floodplain is just an update. That's something that's just pure. That's something that just goes through like, here's the FEMA map now, and that's pretty much it. That one doesn't bother me. That should literally be just administrative, just essentially something that we're required to do. I can't imagine being a single question on the floor about that. Maybe we could check on the bylaw updates. I thought they were just kind of like fixing inconsistencies. There wasn't any substantive changes. I do see a point having 4 of them. I'm assuming all 4 require supermajorities of 2/3. But I don't. The 3A will be a discussion. In fact, I like to put the 3A behind the other ones just to make sure that people stay for the other ones. That's one people are going to show up for. That's ones people are going to have questions about. I was at the hearing about that. I was at the what do you call it? The one where we kind of went with the consultant and talked about various things and stuff like that. I've attended quite a few meetings about the 3A. Couple of meetings I don't think were that well attended, but others were very well attended. That one's going to have quite a bit of discussion to it. I do say that.
That's a majority vote on the MBTA zoning.
You're right. It is. That's right. It's just a majority vote.
Yes.
They changed the laws on that just to make it easier. The state kind of stacked the deck on us on that one, didn't they?
Yes.
Marion, yeah, what's your comment?
All right. No, I agree with your approach. I was just going to ask Jeremy. I don't know if Heidi is here. I don't see her picture, but maybe Jeremy.
Addie May seems to be adding the chair of the planning board is here. Addie May is here. I don't see Heidi.
Oh,
tonight.
Addie May then. Oh, great. Okay. What about the accessory dwelling unit bylaw? I don't see that here.
Yeah, I know Heidi. No, they've had that conversation at the planning board, and Heidi took it off the list on their behalf. But
okay,
for Addie May.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't.
We do have. We aren't doing a full blown accessory dwelling bylaw because the state is still working out their details. What we have done in the warrant article that we are kind of calling that we'll set up as kind of a consent agenda format as like the integration changes and definitions and schedule of use tables update. We have included a definition that allows the state definition, which is the by right ADU, and then we have the special permit ADU. So our town of Sherborn bylaws in existence right now require special permits for ADUs and up to 1,200 square feet. So what we've done is the by right ADU will be anything that's up to 900 square feet, which is where the direction the state's going in. Anything greater than 900 square feet is a by permit ADU. So we're introducing those 2 definitions in kind of the consent agenda of all the area where we're doing some cleaning up and conforming and bringing things, standardizing some language across zoning as we've been reviewing details.
Yeah, I see that you have to make that change in an interim way, but I'm a little concerned that the ADU, I've been at these meetings with you guys, and it is it's a little hard to get your head around at first between 900 and 1200 and by right, not by right. So I'm just wondering if it actually wouldn't be better to make that a separate article, or if you can, put it off. Can it be put off for a year and still be?
If we don't have it, we've been advised by council to make sure we don't put off the whole thing. So
Okay.
it's under, town council has advised us to at least have the definition in place. A
Okay.
full ADU bylaw, we have to wait, but
I'm a little bit
in
afraid
essence,
that that will be
Mary,
seen
Mary-
by the public as not just a housekeeping issue, but something that the planning board in their scheming way is trying to slip in. I mean, we know that's not the case, but I'm just worried about the optics of it at town meeting.
I mean, it's hard to know what everyone's, we live in a world of conspiracy theories, so there's always that. But the reason why we've included it in the section of where we really are just, streamlining definitions, making sure that we're using the same terms, making sure that our use tables has the same definitions throughout our zoning bylaw. The reason we're not adding or changing our existing ADU zoning bylaws. All we are doing is acknowledging the state has a by right option that's up to 900 square feet. And we are, by making sure that we have a definition that we bring forward to town meeting that distinguishes the state ADU versus what we currently already have in place, our existing ADU bylaw. It allows our existing ADU bylaw to continue to have some, I guess, merit and use for those ADU units greater than 900 square feet.
All right. And Sadie, while I have you, Marion, did I answer your question? 'Cause I was going to ask a question a little different.
No, go ahead. Addie did answer it, but I'm still concerned that it will be kind of it's more than just housekeeping because you're adding a new definition in the zoning bylaw.
So if I could, Eric, my point is that having attended 1,200 town meetings, people are going to fall asleep. They're going to be bored. They're going to leave. And if we have 100 quorum, there'll be 10 people who will sit through. I mean, they might sit through the first 4 of these, or 5 of these, or 6. I don't know how many they're going to be. It's if there's a way that we can do fewer zoning at once, it's better for the voters. That's all my point was. This not opposing it or criticizing in any way the work that was done. It's all good. It's just this an attention capability that voters have. We're going to exhaust it.
No, I get that. Yeah, we talked about when we talked about the quorum. There's no question about that. Maybe Addie, we can just talk like Addie, do you see anything in like the sign regulations being controversial? You know what I'm trying to say? Like I get what Paul's saying because the zoning things do seem to trigger things, but some are just more controversial than others. Like I don't see the floodplain being controversial in the slightest.
In the floodplain, there was no, it's not even something planning board deliberates because it's a state, the state provides the language and says, this is what every town needs to adopt. So
I've done it many times, both here and another community. I've done that many times. Here's the FEMA map. That is what it is. The sign regulations, did you get much pushback? Have you heard, is there anything about that you think might, any businesses or whatever?
we haven't heard much pushback. I think we've strived to not make anything drastic, just add a simple kind of one little adjustment.
Is that
you know,
something that needs to be done this year, Amy?
I think there was enough request for something to be done that it should not be put off.
Yeah, I think it's a backstory to it.
Yeah, I know the backstory.
All right. We can do it in 4 years. All right. What one? I don't know. I appreciate Paul saying maybe Jeremy could talk to Heidi a little bit. I don't want to talk her out of it. Just get a further sense of any of these. I'm inclined that these 4 might be fine, given that 2 of them are pretty benign, even maybe 3 of them are benign. And the 3A is going to be the big one. That I'm not as that's the one that's going to generate all the discussion. All right, anything else about the town meeting thing? I kind of want to move on to that. We'll just have some further discussions about the zoning. I don't want to, poo-poo something because I know planning board's done a lot of work and Heidi and Addie have done a lot of work. And unless we see something's gonna be hung up, maybe we can I don't know. We'll have those continue those discussions.
Can I move to close the warrant?
All right, we have a motion to close the warrant. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion about the warrant in general? All right. All in favor? Stephen?
Aye.
Jeff?
All right.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I am I as well. All right. Thank you, everyone. What do we got next coming up here? My thing's out of order here a little bit.
Budgets, the operating budgets.
Yep. Oh, there it is. All right. That's what we're here for. Thank you for all staff that have been patiently waiting here till 9:30.
Oh my gosh, it's 9:30 and now we're gonna start talking about the budgets.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I want to respect at least the people who have waited through everything. I think that's fair. Jeremy, you take the lead on this.
Yeah, so just bringing forward draft budgets for FY26 for some of the larger budgets and a new budget that fall under the select board's purview. So those budget makers and department heads are here. Just in a quick summary, and then we'll let them give a little more detail. But on the police budget, essentially meets advisory guidance. The fire department budget does include some service level updates and a market adjustment for EMTs is included in the ambulance services budget. There's a new budget called emergency communications, which is where the assessment for the regional dispatch is going to be placed. We're in the 4th year of a multi-year agreement with the Holbrook Regional Dispatch Center. This is the first year, FY26 will be the first year that Sherborn needs to pay a share of that assessment. That assessment share is phased in. In FY26, Sherborn would essentially need to pay 50% of 6 months worth, so essentially a quarter of the full estimate, which is $81,000, and that's what's carried in the budget model currently. By FY28, the full assessment would need to be paid by Sherborn if under the current agreement, which currently is $332,000 per year. And the chiefs can comment on that as far as the background that they're doing to try to help give more permanent offset state aid towards that assessment. The public works budget does include a service level adjustment. The town building budget meets advisory guidance, and Klaus is also here. IT. The IT budget does include some service level adjustments. So we invited him to give some detail on that. So just a brief overview. Not sure which one you want to tackle first.
Let me do this. Let me bring it to the board. And I'm just going to go literally in like the order that they're listed here. I'll just say police budget from the board. Are there any questions about the police budget?
I've got a general question.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
Just want to know overall, do we have a balanced budget, or are we dealing with a deficit and we have to look for cuts?
You have a balanced budget currently as drafted.
So we don't have to we don't have to beat up anybody and see if we can save a penny here and a penny there.
No, not yet.
We have a balanced budget, but we have the least free cash that we've had in
still
like
have excess
decades.
levy capacity available left after with this draft FY26 budget as presented.
So not to take the place of George, but I'm going to do it because no one else is that but cuts would still be helpful because we have the least free cash that we've had in many, many years. So I will say that it is balanced and that it meets the levy, but there's very little capacity. There's very little wiggle room in there as it is. We're right at the skin of our teeth.
I think the story is that your excess levy capacity has been decreasing year over year. And with that trend, there's a possibility of an override in your budget future, but not as drafted in the draft budget put forward is not currently required.
FY26. Yeah, Stephen, this is a general question before I just do one department after the other.
Yeah, I would say I have a sort of general comment first that will kind of be directed at all of the budget makers that are in attendance here. And then I can look at the police specifically, but as a general, I mean, just looking at all these budgets, generally speaking, they all actually look very good. One thing that I would just like everyone to keep in mind, kind of in keeping with what Eric is saying, is that essentially every small cut is helpful here. I mean, essentially, as a very broad brush, right? We are limited by Prop 2.5, which essentially says that anything over 2.5% increase in the budget basically is going to be cutting into our excess levy capacity. Now, that would not be the case if we were a town that year over year had significant amounts of new growth to absorb the, higher than 2.5% budget increases. But we do not foresee a great deal of new growth in the next couple of years. And so, having a target of, realistically, I would say, having a target of reducing your budget as much as possible is excellent, but certainly trying to get your increase below a 2.5% increase would be sort of like the pie in the sky goal. I recognize that is not really possible, but I would just ask that when you go through the process with advisory, there's a few lines here and there where I might identify that your fiscal 26 ask is actually a few $1,000s higher than the 3-year average of your actuals. And there may or may not be a good reason for that, or it may just be that you've been asking for an amount and recently you haven't needed that amount. And so if advisory starts asking you to chip away at those things, I would just encourage you to have an open mind and be willing to make those adjustments, because really we're entering a period where every little bit probably counts. And talking with the chair of advisory recently, he thinks it's inevitable that we're going to hit an override in the next year or two. But if we can avoid that at all, that would be really great. But yeah, no, that was really just my own general comment to everybody.
It's a good comment. Absolutely. Any other general comments before I'm just going to go to the department. I'm just going to pick a department that we'll talk about, unless there's no more general comments. Okay, I'm just going to do the order that's listed right here on our agenda. The police budget. Does anyone here on the select board have any comments or questions relative to the police budget? We have the chief. We have the chief right here. I see his camera's on. I'll let him off easy.
I'm literally just I went through all the budgets before the meeting, but I didn't they're on my computer, so it's like I didn't highlight anything. So now I'm just going through all the lines again to see if I can remember particular lines that stood out to me.
I gotta go old school.
I will make just a general comment on the budget, just so you're aware. So we are in the final year of the police union contract and the police lieutenant's contract. So the numbers that are reflected in the budget, we use the same numbers that were in last year's raises for this current fiscal year. So there could be some changes as we do negotiate moving forward.
Understood. that makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I have any specific comments or questions about the police budget, other than, again, a few lines. It looks like you might be a couple $1,000s over your actuals for the past 3 years. And, if there's wiggle room and advisory asks you to push it down a little bit, just be open to pushing it down if you can. But I see nothing really stands out in this budget for me.
Yeah,
Very good.
I understand.
How about the fire department? Any questions, comments? Well, to the fire department budget.
Fire. Yeah, no, fire budget looked, yeah. Yeah, because I saw your expenses were at nearly 7% over, but when I kind of looked at your individual lines, nothing really stood out as a wait, do you really need this?
Yeah, that looked good to me. Absolutely. All right. Next down, emergency communications.
Wait, was that the one that's just the dispatch?
Yeah, I think so.
Eric,
Yeah.
you might want to, while you're on fire department, you might want to discuss the EMT or ambulance budget.
Here.
It should be right after fire.
Oh, yeah.
In your pack.
EMT, yeah. All right, yeah. So EMT salaries are up 12%. Is that just a market adjustment?
So about 20,000 of that is a market adjustment. 20,000 of that increase is we have 28 shifts a week. Previously, 26 of them were budgeted to be staffed in the station and 2 were on call, and it's going to be all 28 shifts with people in the building going forward. And then about $10,000 for the call increase.
Okay. And what's ambulance quality assurance?
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember, I think you were the chair of advisory. We used to have a $4,000 line where we hired a consultant to do quality assurance on every single emergency medical call that we responded to. I had a staff person trained in that was working an ambulance shift. So he was doing that work while he was on shift, but he can't work a shift anymore. So we have to go back to using a consultant to do that work. It's mandated through our biannual ambulance inspection by the state.
I see.
So
is that something that in the future you think you could bring back sort of in-house instead of a consultant, or is that likely to just continue moving forward?
We're going to try. There are some benefits to having a consultant do it. There are no internal issues with them doing, their friends' reports, if you will, doing the quality assurance on it. It hasn't been an issue in the past, but I'm looking in the future to see if we can get somebody trained and certified to do that again. It can be kind of difficult having all part-time people that work the ambulance. You know what I mean? They're all great and they do a wonderful service for the town, but to have somebody do that regularly, it can be difficult.
Okay. Cell phones has been knocked out. Is that going into the IT budget or something?
It's included in the fire budget. So we got rid of some lines. We did some reorganization. Our cell phone budget's high, but what people don't realize is we have a computer in every vehicle that belongs to the department with pre-plan information. So those all have data plans. And that's why that number's up. We got the computers on about a $90,000 grant from State 911 through the Holbrook transition. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I've got on fire.
The paper on the orders are listed. All right, anything else on fire department? Sorry, I look like I had to turn a light on so I could see, and now it makes my face dark. I look like I'm one of those people who's interviewed on the news who try to hide the identity.
Can you disguise your voice too?
Yeah, I wish I could actually. All right. So how about the emergency communications?
I mean, is that just the 81,000 for dispatch?
Is that all that is?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we should all be aware that is that going up to 162 next year?
Yes, it would go up next year or in FY27, probably double, and then get to the full amount in FY28 of 330,000. But I think the chiefs can say that there's a lot of advocacy going on in the background to help with that. Maybe they could expand on that just to give you some context.
Yeah, there's definitely we're working, Chief Ward and I, behind the scenes with the director at dispatch, to work with state 911 for additional funding for not only for Sherborn but for all the communities to offset the costs for every community. State 911 is making some additional offerings to other communities that aren't already part of a rec, with lower costs. There's a offset in service as well. We wouldn't get the same amount of service that we get. But because of that, the recs are concerned that they may not get as many communities that want to come on board. So there's been some discussion about offsetting the assessments to each community that's already part of a dispatch center.
Do you have any ideas on sort of just ballpark, like what the amount of a state 911 grant would be?
In like what they offset would be in the future?
Yeah.
The discussion has been to make it free for everybody.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic. Just because of the way we're set up. Just to give you an example, if we were to have gone to a state-run 911 center, what Chief Ward just mentioned about the computers and those things that we've gotten, we wouldn't be eligible for. As we move forward in the next fiscal year, we're actually going to be able to replace the generator at both the police station and the fire station. We had an outage recently, and the generator at the police station didn't kick on. And as a result, the director at the dispatch center reached out to Sean and to ask for quotes immediately to be able to replace those. So those type of things wouldn't be available. So to have a little bit of an assessment that we pay is probably going to be beneficial in the long run with the other equipment that we're going to have available.
Can I just add something? I know the board's aware of the initial grant funding that we got to make the transition, but just speaking for the fire department, we've gotten additional grant money virtually every year for things that we need. In fact, we're working on an application through Holbrook right now for about another $150,000 worth of equipment that we'll likely get. So I think that's important to note that every year, like the chief said, the generators, that number doesn't include the generator for the fire station, but every year we're eligible through Holbrook to go after additional state 911 money for infrastructure equipment, which is huge. Those are some big numbers. So I think that's important to consider.
Well, let me ask. So I can't help but think of it. So I know because I was on the board when we first got this thing, and I was always warning people, we're going to be weaned off. We're going to have that acceleration. Do either of you, the two chiefs, do you think there's a chance that some communities might, if it goes to the full 300 grand, it's a lot here, it's a lot everywhere. Do you think some communities might just go back to hiring dispatchers?
No, from what I've seen and from my experience in the past, that hasn't happened. What has happened is sometimes maybe things will be reconfigured. Communities will move into different centers with different people. But I don't see anyone really anywhere going back to civilian dispatch. It's too difficult to hire the people. The numbers aren't out there for people that want to do that job. It's been very difficult.
And I just want to add something, in some previous discussions that I've witnessed, the questions come up, can we just move to another rec or a regional center and zero the cost out? Well, the issue with that is state 911 would have to approve that, and it becomes complicated if we're already located in a rec currently. They might not be as likely to, that's a big what if, right? So I'm really hopeful, as Chief Galvin said, that they're going to work with the regional centers that are already set up to try to offset or zero out the cost. That's our big hope.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully.
What a great idea, though. Every 5 years we go to a different rec center and we end up never having to pay anything.
Yeah.
But sooner or later we'll be caught.
That would be great.
The first time, I think.
All right, I think we've beaten that one up enough there. If it's okay, well, I'm gonna move on to the next one. I think Sean's probably around here somewhere being patient, or he's not. Who knows? DPW, Public Works. There he is. Any questions from this board on the Public Works budget?
Are we doing town buildings also, or just DPW right now?
I guess we just hit them both. Frankly, it's the same director, right? So we can probably just,
Yeah, because I just scroll through the packet, and town buildings comes first in the packet. So, I think the only thing that I had a question about here was, yeah, the slew of HVAC maintenance repairs. Um, you know, if I add up the request for HVAC repairs, it's something like, I don't know, $35,000, which when I look at the actual expenses for the past 3 years and all those categories, it's like your ask just for this year is more than the total ask of all of them over the past 3 years. So I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Well, yeah, if you're combining all of them, I mean, part of the story is we didn't have a library we were in 3 years ago. So I'm adding in there. Hold on, I'm trying to catch up on my
Yeah, the
tablet.
library, that's 5,000 of that is a library, so that I
Right.
can fully understand.
And town hall, those systems, town hall was rehabbed in 2020, 1999, 2020, sorry, 2000. So, those systems are 20, 24, 25 years old. They need work. So we're regularly having maintenance technicians there. There's a fair amount of work. Just to keep them up and healthy and keeping the place warm.
Yeah, I mean, HVAC kind of implies, Steve, that it's just cooling. This is heating as well.
Yeah. Are these things that previously might have been in the capital package that have now been brought into operating?
Well, thanks for asking that, Stephen. As you know, almost everything was. The operating budget didn't cover repairing anything but my shoelaces. So repairs, again, the threshold's supposed to be $25,000. Even at 10,000, most of these repairs are well below that. But we were for years just rolling that into a pot that was the capital ask, and they frankly weren't all capital. So some of that increase is that it's catching up with us, in the operating budget where it should be. When a maintenance technician comes out, we spend a couple $1,000s fixing, a unit heater in the clerk's office or a bay heater at the station or at the DPW. It's not capital. It's a repair, and it's a normal repair. It's not, these things aren't unexpected. These are annual repairs as we start things up. Sometimes we defer it, and it might look like it's abrupt, but it might be because Sean was trying to stretch, a 30-year-old heater to keep working for another year, and then we replace a couple of them. But they certainly, as you know, we had these discussions when you were chair. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
the operating budget was always lacking where it should have been. So we slowly creep up, and HVAC is one of those places. Building maintenance as a whole, I don't know if you have the file where you can see the footnotes, but I think I do on my tablet.
Yeah, it's
Just general building maintenance as a whole is, Jeremy will remember we had a pretty big plumbing issue where we had sewer gases all in town hall, and it was, there was no preventative maintenance that was going to predict these drain lines in what is now the land use office to just fail. They're cast iron lines. One would have probably thought they would have lasted 50 years. They lasted 24. And we had sewer gases just leaking into the space. So, those are just repairs and it was expensive. But it still was not a capital expense. It wasn't, insurance related. It was just, it's an antique building. And the last time it was rehabbed was 24 years ago. So we should expect those costs to be going up, but we can thank ourselves that we don't have any debt on that rehab at this point either. So there's a flip side of that. It's a small cost to pay to keep the building going.
Is the town buildings related capital request gonna go down this year then?
So what we've done this year is tap the brakes a little bit on the big ask, because we're still, as you know, we have a handful of projects that kind of got thrown in the mix with water systems and PFAS and everything else that were outside of the scope of what we had for the rolling capital. So we still have some capital from previous town meeting articles. And this year, what we've done, I don't think you have it in front of you, I'm not sure. What we did is we just tailored this year's facilities ask to refreshing the on-site insight reports and doing a full roll-up of all 6 buildings. So it's going to include an assessment of the library. And I want to remind everyone when we talk the library, because people's eyes usually roll, it's not a brand new building. We've been in there over a year, but a lot of the equipment was bought in 2018. So it's time to get that into the capital plan. It's our biggest building that we're taking care of. So it'll be a good opportunity to refresh that plan. And so this time next year, we'll have a really good plan to present.
Speaking of on-site insight, I've heard rumors that the schools have been less than enamored with the on-site insight report and have actually gone to a different company for that. I don't know if you know anything about that, or if you feel also that the on-site insight reports end up being perhaps not super accurate a couple of years down the line.
Well, nothing's accurate that, if you did a report in 2019 and 2020, and actually that's noted in my capital ask. The last major assessment we did at Town Hall, the fire stations, DPW, was 2020. So that was the height of COVID, and that was, it was chaos. The price, it was the middle of the price spike. So if you're trying to use numbers now that were developed in 2019, 2020, those are they're not useless, but you can't just throw a factor at it. I'm sure there's some statistic I'm sure you could just throw at the equipment, but wage rates are way off and equipment's all over the place. It's slowed down, certainly, but those aren't that good. But I would say that the old adage of junk in, junk out would hold true. If you're not going to pay attention and walk through and do the report with the auditors when they're doing their assessment, then it's not going to be very good.
Yeah, but otherwise you're pretty happy continuing on with on-site insight.
I am. Again, if it's not going to do much good if the on-site insight report says we need to start spending $700,000 or $800,000 on these facilities to keep them up, and we spend $100,000.
Yeah.
I mean, you might as well not do it. And then, same thing goes for the roads.
We would have on-site insight kind of take it a step further as well, and help us with how all of the buildings roll up into a capital ask, a 20-year capital ask. And then the update, as Sean mentioned, will give us more current pricing, which is valuable as well. So,
all right, I'd like to recognize Marianne as our
Yeah, I just have a small question on tree removals and pruning. Back in fiscal year 22, you budgeted 50,000. You're budgeting 50,000 again, but knowing the way it goes around here, I noticed in the average, well, in fiscal year 2024, it was 81,800 something. So you've budgeted 50,000. Is that going to be, are you going to need an override? I mean, is that enough money? I mean, I'm not trying to give money away to balance out Jeff and Steve, but I am concerned that that may not be realistic.
Well, using these numbers as the history actually woefully underestimates what we spent, because most of what we spent in the past 5 years was capital, and then we did stabilization fund, we did ARPA. This past fiscal year, we used ARPA. We've somewhat caught up with it, and therefore Eversource is kind of carrying more of the load. If this drought does what I'm afraid it might have done. I don't know. I can't predict what's going to happen. We certainly caught up with what was standing out there dead from the gypsy moths
Well, that's good.
from 2017, 18. So I'm hoping that's enough. I mean, if we have a major die off of the oaks, or other things from this late summer, fall drought, that'll be different. But we typically, if we see the trees not leaf out next spring, that doesn't mean they need to come down next summer.
No.
Most of the oaks we were getting 3, 4, in Paul's area 5 years later. We kind of need to see what's there, but there's definitely not as much standing deadwood as there was. And again, Eversource is forever doing that. There's always 1/5 of town that Eversource is targeting. So we hope we get back to just maintenance and not emergency.
Yeah.
All right.
Two other quick things. The outsourced mowing goes to 0. I see there's a footnote there, but I don't have the footnotes. I'm just assuming that that's being handled in-house now.
That's exactly it. Steve, we used to do it for decades. We did the mowing, then it got outsourced. We brought it back in this year, basically to figure out what it was going to take. We were a little bit behind on the equipment, and then we had a wicked growing season, early spring and early summer. And we kept up with it, and then everything stopped growing for 2 months, but it was late in the season. It was an odd season, but we decided to keep it in-house and use that money elsewhere.
And then the last one is gasoline. You're budgeting 70,000, but the past 3, that's between 15 and 21,000 less than you've actually spent on gasoline the past 3 years, which I assume that's not a number you can massage. You're going to use the amount of gas you're going to use, and it's going to cost what it's going to cost, right? So is that going to be way too low for your gas budget?
I hope not. Again, I'm not a futures market guy, but there was a couple of major spikes the past couple of years that we saw. We obviously saw a huge spike when Ukraine hit. It's stabilized a little bit. So judging by what we've used this year, again, there's 2 major factors that we have no control over. One is what happens elsewhere that causes the prices to spike, and then a huge hit on the winter. If we have a 2014 winter, then the fuel number's way off, because we don't carry that in snow and ice. We can. We could charge the excess. What's that?
If for some reason a year where you do have a big snow response, you could carry that fuel and allocate it to your snow and ice budget, and then fund that overage just like you do your snow and ice overage. So you have a safety valve there for extreme weather events.
I think we did it once. I don't remember what year, but I think we may have done that because it was a clear spike that was snow and ice driven. And that does more than anything else we can do. I mean, energy conservation can't do a whole lot. Anti-idling can't move the needle nearly as much as a few huge snowstorms. So that's kind of where most of the variability. I mean, the PD uses almost the same amount of gallons every week, as does the FD. The FD doesn't use that much anyway, and then DPW's falls off and then spikes up in the winter if we have a winter. Last year we didn't use much in gallons, but the prices spiked earlier in the year.
Drill, baby, drill. We'll go down. All right.
Could I mention just a couple of things on this budget, the public works budget, just for your awareness?
Sure.
There is some additional service level addition to help support the recycling committee and the transfer station operations. Just wanted to note that, and that was raised from some recent conversations with Charlie Tyler, who's actually on the Zoom call today, and trying to help take some of the burden off of that volunteer committee to do stuff that really is a staff function. So that Sean's incorporated into the salary lines. And I guess to get back a little bit on capital, which we'll bring the capital projects to you at a future meeting. So you'll have a chance to get, your weigh in on those. But we talked a little bit about town building capital and our intent there, but the other one to just touch on as it relates to this budget is the stormwater request. So the capital stormwater requests, we really looked into, and there's a portion of that that really is attributable to operational aspects of the stormwater management permit. So we pulled that out of the capital and have built it into the operating budget. It doesn't stand out well because it's a new budget line. Somewhere in the middle there, the DPW stormwater permit annual operations. In lieu of a capital funded article for that, we built it into the operating budget where it really should be. Just wanted to point that out.
And I do like that. I do, because I don't think it should be something that bonded and goes exempt from 2.5 as well. And we are phasing, frankly, into more of a maintenance side of that, to be honest with you. So that's a good idea. I support that. I'm having a little trouble. Where is that?
Charlie, do you want to add anything about support we're hoping to give you?
It's about 8 lines down below the salaries line in the budget.
Oh, there it is. Well, okay. Yeah, I like that.
What we did, Eric, is we basically tried to separate what we had been working on for phosphorus reduction, which basically is the capital, the structural BMPs and everything else that we're working on long term, because we still have some capital money for that, and we separated that out to what has been the annual effort for the permit.
Yeah.
And of course we all know it's been increasing for a handful of years ever since they released the permit. So this should cover that, and I mean it was over time, hopefully that will decrease. The annual effort should decrease. We would hope, once we're up and running and the permit kind of settles down.
And then on the capital side for FY26, there won't be a stormwater capital request.
Good. All right, that makes me happy. Anyone else? Yeah. All right. Saying that, very good. Thank you for bringing forward a balanced budget, and again, I applaud Jeremy for having a good handle. Keeping these these traditions always been silos where like only the managers have talked about it, but Jeremy's done a good job, I think, pulling all this together as well. And thank you to all the different department heads. All right, without any further ado, we'll move on to consent agenda. Any motions or comments relative to the consent agenda?
You skip past Klaus. He's here.
Oh, I go to the line items. IT.
Got to be an IT question. He's been here.
I thought I just said it.
Oh, it's fine. You can keep going, Eric. No worries. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Have any comments to the IT budget?
No, I did take a close look at it because it is up a significant percentage, but all the comments and the explanations, they all made sense to me, so I have no questions.
What's the big picture? They're absorbing stuff that wasn't other departments. Yeah,
or various service contracts. It seems like if when their service contract goes up, then obviously that budget line's got to go up. It's like 19% increase in internet charges because increase in fees from Verizon. Like, well, what are you gonna do?
That's correct. The one thing I would highlight, though, is that we are doing an add-on service. We really do need to boost our cybersecurity capability when it comes specifically to emails. Obviously, I mean, you guys probably have seen headlines left and right of communities have to deal with that. We're no different. So we're looking to add a service. We've been demoing one more recently, which is working very nicely. And we're looking to add this as as part of our cybersecurity budget moving forward. So that really accounts for a big chunk of the additional ask this year.
Yeah,
That
and I
actually,
support that.
secondary byproduct of that security enhancement is it actually will help us with public records requests related to email. So
Oh,
it's got a secondary benefit as well.
That's good.
that's a good one. Yeah, those are that was a definition of unfunded mandate from the state when they lowered what you could charge and everything else like that. All because the state police were rogue, to be honest with you. But whatever, that's a whole other story. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but a good thing that we're handling it that way.
Yeah, we have Mimecast at my place of employment, and I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Mhm. All right. Anything else on this here? I'll move on. All right. Thank you very much, Klaus.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the support, always.
Absolutely. Okay. Consent agenda.
No approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Stephen,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
I might as well. Do we have any select board reports?
Can I just say that I need to sign off. I got an issue. So I know there's town administrator report still to go, and the Sherborn Water District. I have some thoughts on that, but I've got to go.
You want to take it out of order, or do you want? Yes, you have to go right now. I will take. Oh, I can't take it out of order. Damn, I got to step away. Okay, I'm sorry, Paul. Okay.
Well, do we need to talk about them all tonight?
Well, it doesn't sound like there are any select board reports. Is that correct? Okay. Any town minister report?
Yeah, just a handful. I can be concise. Yeah, just update on the Veteran Services IMA. It's been fully approved by all three communities. Medfield was the last to approve. The select board in Medfield approved. So the VSO has already reached out to us to start lining up his services and do meet and greet and introduce himself to the community. And so that's great. A lot more to come on that. And
Congratulations, well done.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a great improvement for the veterans in Sherborn and fill that gap. Shortly, we'll get the actual IMA document for you to sign. Walpole just wanted to make sure they had a clean version for you folks to sign, but it's been voted and it's approved and all ready to go. Update on the town campus water supply, the monthly PFAS testing. Our quarterly average is over the 20 parts per million, parts per trillion. It's at 21, which means we have to do another public education, public notice. So we'll have to get that posted. What's weird about it is we won't have to test for the next 2 months because we're over. We have a violation, so we don't have to test more. It's kind of backwards, but the way it works. And then I wanted to just give an update about at the Capital Budget Committee this past Tuesday, the schools presented their capital projects, regional and local, and gave an update on the Pine Hill HVAC project. Last town meeting, you appropriated $300,000 and the schools contributed $100,000 for a $400,000 project to add HVAC units to 3 zones of Pine Hill Elementary School. So for that $400,000 project was to cover those areas. Since town meeting, the schools have advanced the design with a designer consultant and are getting ready to put that out to bid. However, the engineering estimate based on that advanced design is significantly over the available appropriations to tackle those 3 areas. So they're trying to come up with alternatives to either stay within their funding or change the scope of the project or come back for additional funds. So I just wanted to raise that up for awareness for you folks. Alternatives could be doing 2 of the 3 zones with the school finding some other sources of funding to cover that cost. The most expensive zone seems to be the auditorium. So that might be one that is not done as part of this round of funding. One of the other alternatives was that one of the 3 units was going to be replaced with an all-electric unit. Apparently, that's about a $50,000 cost to do this conversion from the gas electric to the all-electric. So that could be a cost savings if that conversion is not done. So that was on for consideration as well. So they were revisiting the cost estimates and scoping, and may come back with some alternatives to consider, including seeking additional funds at town meeting in the spring, or doing a revised scope of work.
All right, thank you very much, Jeremy. All right, thank you for hanging out, Bo. I'm gonna step up. I recuse myself out of this one, so thank you, everyone. I'll see everyone in a couple weeks. Charlie Tyler, I'll see you at Nuea. Have fun.
Great. So, Paul, do you have time for the last agenda item?
Just so I'd pass on the idea, I was looking at the statute, and it creates this position of interim commissioners, all appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And the interim commissioners, I was trying to figure out what exactly is the interim that they're covering. And the way I read the statute is that it's covering the period of time from now until the private entities nominate and designate their membership on this commission. So the actual makeup of the commission after the interim period would have a representative of one of the projects, a representative of the second of the projects, a representative from our regular water commissioners, and 2 appointed by the Board of Selectmen. That doesn't happen until essentially the 2 projects are further along and they designate their people. So we need to appoint 5 people now.
That's exactly right. That's what this is about.
So my thought on that was the best way to do appointments is to let everybody know and advertise and let people come forward.
I think we're also down a water commissioner because Roger Denver moved out of town.
That's right. Jeremy and I have discussed this, and Jeremy, you might want to take over and report our discussion, but just people who kind of want to have their foot in the door, or other people in town who are interested, would be great. We definitely need to open it up to the town. It's true, but we thought that to have some continuity between the interim commissioners and the definitive commissioners, it might be good to have the select board indeed, appoint 2 people. It's an appointment, so it can be like any other appointment. People can come out of the woodwork in town who have some expertise, but at least we have some, it's not an election, we have some judgment call there. We're looking for people that have some expertise in the area of managing such systems, or the engineering, or other aspects. But for now, I think it also, since we ultimately will need, the water commissioners will need to appoint one of the members, it might be wise for them to appoint one of the members to the interim commission, and that would give the commission also some longevity. So that's what we want to discuss tonight, exactly what sort of process you think would be good. What we've discussed with Jeremy and I and with the water commissioners is, yes, getting the water commissioners to appoint one person, it happens that all three of them have real expertise in this area. And the select board can talk about, perhaps appointing a select board member, if the board decides that's a good idea, to give us some continuity between the group that's been working on the legislation for so long and dealing with Natick and Framingham and Toll Brothers. There might be an advantage to have some continuity there. Of course, Jeremy will provide that, but he can't be a member of the commission because he's not a resident. So basically, we're opening it up to what your opinions are about this. And we'd like to kind of get an interim commission in place because they will be a party to the intermunicipal agreements. That's the first important job they're going to have.
So we can appoint 4 right now. And if you're willing to serve, I'm happy to nominate you to be on that commission right now.
Wait, we're jumping the gun here a little bit. I do.
That's
I want
okay.
to, because Frank has his hand up, and is one of the water commissioners, right?
Yeah.
So Frank, I guess can I hear your thoughts first?
Yes, just to let you know that there was a replacement has joined the committee for Roger. So we have 3 full members now. And we plan to discuss who we might want to put forward at our February meeting on the 11th.
Excellent. So that takes care of one position, and we know you'll make a good choice, Frank. So thank you.
Is there anything that prevents appointing all 3 water commissioners onto this interim? I mean, it makes it a little challenging because then every time this commission meets, it would also be a quorum of the water commissioners, so it would always have to be a joint meeting. But I'm in my head, it's just the difficulty of trying to find 4 totally not water commissioner related volunteers for this position, if that makes sense. I'm like, the challenge of finding that many people might be difficult, but
we have a very important tradition to advertise and allow opportunity, and not to have everything be insider appointments. So adding the 3 water commissioners at this point leaves 2 appointments to be made. And it seems obvious that maybe you and Marion would be the other 2, and then you got 5. But that excludes the public entirely. So my thought was that we ought to advertise and give everybody an opportunity to at least submit an application. It's really something we work very hard in this town to have, is that kind of opportunity for every citizen to be part of the government. But that isn't to say that I'm happy to nominate both you and Marion to be temporary interim commissioners to carry the transition forward. And that's not a majority of the Board of Selectmen, so you wouldn't have to give open meeting law notice the meeting is Board of Selectmen. But if the water commissioners appoint 1, then you have 3, and then you can appoint 2 more. The 2 more should be public.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I think that Paul kind of arrived at what I was going to suggest. When Marion and I met with the water commissioners, it didn't seem that all 3 had the capacity to be on, and participate fully in this new water district. So that may not be viable by way of their availability, but for having to have them participate in either choosing one of themselves to participate or another delegate, having Marion and Stephen on for continuity, and then that would give two that the board could publicize as open seats that you could then, solicit some candidates from residents to see and vet and appoint. That seems like a good approach to me.
And that doesn't preclude another water commissioner from submitting an application. I'm not saying, no, I'm just saying we fought too hard for too many years from what used to be a fairly closed system. You had to know somebody to get onto a board in Sherborn, to now we have a welcoming open door that any citizen of the town has the opportunity. That's too important to let go.
We totally agree with you, Paul. You're absolutely right. And I think what we would like to have, at least as a select board, we'd like to kind of decide how to move forward on this so that we'll have an interim commission in place in case the Natick and Framingham IMAs move along as quickly as we'd like them to, and we actually get agreements ready to go. So can I make a proposal?
Sure.
Okay. I propose that for the interim North Sherborn Water and Sewer District Commission, we ask the town water commissioners to appoint one member, could be one of themselves or not, and that Steve and I serve, at least for the time being, as transition people to we're involved in the IMAs. We could be replaced at any time and advertise. Basically, that would leave two positions open to the town, and it should be an open advertisement. We should give people time to find out about it and respond, and then we can see what comes out of the woodwork. We have a lot of expertise hidden away in these woods, and we might get someone really excellent to get involved.
So I move that as what you just said as a motion.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I'll second that motion. And we have people like Brian Moore and Tom Trainer and all kinds of people.
Yes, that's why I want it open.
Great. Well, we have a motion and a second. So I'll open the voting. Jeff?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well.
Well, thanks. So then we can put together a notice to be advertised to the town and start spreading the word.
Diane is good at that. She does that for our other appointments. She's got a whole process.
Yeah, she's very good. Although we don't advertise in the newspapers much anymore. I think nobody reads the newspapers anymore.
I actually do put a press release in.
I know you do, but I mean,
and hopefully they read them.
Well, it wouldn't hurt,
No, I think
don't
it's
know
a
what
good
the
idea.
legal requirements are.
Everybody's online now. They're not waiting for the Dover Sherborn Press to arrive in their mailbox.
True.
But, we have to get the word out there, and it's hard these days to get the word out.
I've been promoting town criers for some time, but we haven't implemented that.
We do need a town crier.
I move that Jeff be appointed town crier. I'll personally buy you a top hat.
All right, that's good.
Go with the position.
And I'll be at the tavern at the fireside waiting for news.
All right. Well, I think that's the last agenda item. So I will take a motion regarding the meeting. To close the meeting?
Second.
Or to extend it
I make a
indefinitely.
motion to close the meeting. Usually Paul's job to do that.
Yeah.
I second.
All righty. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I guess I'm supposed to say nay, but.
Yeah, that's John's job.
All righty. See you in a couple weeks.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Damn.